student web portal development here at the coordinating board, and I'm also the director for college access initiatives at the University of Texas System. So I have a couple of roles, but in the role I play here will be as a member of the staff of the Higher Education Coordinating Board. This is the very first meeting of a new committee. Most people are out there somewhere watching in on webcast. As you know, we threw this meeting on very short notice, so we have probably a group about this size that are watching in. We may also have a couple of latecomers to this meeting. While we, oh, is he coming? Like now, or is it? While we wait for the commissioner to come, maybe we can just go around the room and introduce ourselves. And I'll start over here with the man who just came in.
Hi, I'm Steve Kinslow. I'm president of Austin Community College.
Drew Chevrolet at Austin Chamber.
Laura Rich, Office of the Governor.
I'm Jacob Friday with Texas Guaranteed Student Loan Corporation.
McGregor Stevenson with the A&M System.
John Cox, Texas Education Agency.
Jimmy Vasquez, I'm the Executive Director at Region 19, El Paso.
Ramiro Fonseca with Sally Mae.
Casey Kennedy with the Coordinating Board.
Joni Roughlake, State Director for Adult Ed, Contractor for TEA.
George Norton, University of Texas, San Antonio.
And I'm Joe Watts with the University of North Carolina System.
Well, thank you all for coming again. You have, most of you I think, have books, and you should have two things, these packets, which you can keep with you as you go through these meetings, and we'll fill in as they go. I can just go through quickly what's going to be on the agenda today. Joe Watts has come in from North Carolina. Last night about 1 a.m. he called me, and he was stuck in Houston yesterday late afternoon, but made it in last night and is here today. He'll need to be on a plane later this afternoon. We'll keep him as long as possible. I hope to have this meeting wrapped up by about 3:30 or so, unless we want to. We can talk as long as we need to, as long as people want to stay, but I know that there are some people that will need to get back on the road or catch a plane also. So we'll have a presentation with Joe Watts, and I've told him that he can take as much time as he needs and as much interest as there are. I think there's going to be a lot of questions and that he can answer, and I encourage everyone to take advantage of Joe being here to learn more about what they're doing in North Carolina. It was the model that we've been looking at as part of the coordinating board. Just a little background about my involvement. The coordinating board just wanted to look into redoing their College for Texans website and wanted some information about what other states and what was happening. Oh, the Commissioner of Higher Education, Raymond Perez.
Why don't you go ahead? I'll just...
Okay, I'll just finish with that. So, we started doing research, and North Carolina kept coming up as a model system for this kind of program. So, we're happy to have Joe here to do that first presentation. I'll talk about a survey of Texas superintendents that we did just this last fall. About what technologies that their schools may be using for college and career planning and application and assistance and advising, and we'll take a look at that survey. There's a separate handout on that's here. We'll talk about a business plan draft that is in your packets under the business plan tab, and that is something that is it was done with a lot of input from interviews, but it should be known it's a product of one man, and that's me. So it is a working draft, and really the outline for this committee to start taking a look and filling it in the way we see fit and what might happen in Texas. If after that, we can discuss a little bit what might be our process after seeing what North Carolina can do of getting the kind of collaboration together and the kind of who we might need to have at the table and what we might need to do to set our own specific requirements for Texas, or if we want to do whatever we need to do to get the requirements in gathering for what might happen in Texas. And that will fit in with then setting our priorities in next meetings. And I don't know if everybody brought their calendar, but we can discuss some times for next meetings over the next 6 months or so. With that, I'll just leave it to the commissioner.
Well, my comments will be very brief. We have, in terms of the overall issue of college access, it seems to me that we have two very significant challenges we have to overcome. First of all is how do we work effectively at scale? We have got to reach literally tens of thousands of families and students who know very little about going to college. Most middle-class kids in Texas go to college. And if we're going to reach our goals of closing the gaps, we are going to have to reach into the population of students who don't have any prior knowledge of higher education, who don't have any family background in higher education, who don't have parents typically who can help them navigate all the complexities associated with making a determination about where you go to college and how you can afford it and what you need in order to be admitted. So we need to make sure that we have a tool that enables us to reach tens of thousands of families and an awful lot of students with information about these issues. The second challenge, it seems to me, that we have is an issue of comprehensiveness and accessibility, and intelligibility is probably a better word. We need to make sure that we provide information to families in a way that is intelligible, that is user-friendly, and that in fact is encouraging, that will encourage students and families to continue with the college application and enrollment process. Lord knows that we make things tough enough already with the FAFSA, so we don't need to do anything as a state that would either maintain the same level of complexity and difficulty. We need to have a tool available that is easily accessible and is intelligible and comprehensive, and that's why I'm excited about this web portal. And we've heard so much about North Carolina. What did you tell me about the number of hits?
Well, you said
you're going to tell us.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, well.
Literally, 2 million students have accounts, and about 1 million students have applied through this. And in terms of daily visitors, we get about 12,000 a day for an average of 16 minutes per visit. So it's not just a hit and miss. It's accounts that students have logged into. So it is a resource of information that people are using on a very wide scale.
Well, and that's precisely why we're here and looking at developing a web portal that's equivalent in usefulness and accessibility. So with that, I'll stop.
Thank you. Joe, would you like to start?
It's a perfect segue because your comments could not have been more perfect in terms of laying the stage for what I'm going to talk about. And let me, in a way, have a little bit more depth in terms of introduction. I work for the University of North Carolina system. I'm part of a team that works on improving college access every day. We come to work thinking about how we can best do that from the central level, from the university system level. As you listen to my comments today, some key things. One is collaboration. We could not do this by ourselves at the system office. We work with 16 public universities. The General Assembly, when they mandated this initiative, said it has to be collaborative with all educational agencies and agencies that support it. But
interesting, so I don't think anyone will hear you unless you're...
You're going to clip it right here. Well, I may end up holding it. Will it go in the pockets okay? Okay, great. It does take the entire spectrum of K-12, public higher ed, 2-year, 4-year, and private higher education to make this happen. It also requires those agencies that work to support students' financial needs, whether they're loan corporations, whether they're guarantee agencies, or the financial agencies. The lower income background a young person comes from, the more they think college costs. We do a better job in higher education of educating a higher percentage of average students from our highest income quartile than the most high achieving students from the lowest income quartile. A much higher percentage of kids that come from wealthy backgrounds with very average grades go to college compared to low-income students with very, very high grades. So you're absolutely right. When young people in middle school think about college, about 85 to 90% of them, 6th graders and 7th graders, say they're going to college. Well, somewhere between that level of aspiration at that age, at 13, 14 years old, and becoming a senior and actually applying to college and getting into college and matriculating, that drops off dramatically. So in some way, we have to collectively figure out how to close that gap, because that's the really sad thing. I was on a flight to New Mexico last week talking to 2 young women sitting next to me from Denmark who are going to school at the University of New Mexico. They learned English in the 4th grade. They knew that they had to have an international, global sort of perspective to be productive. They told me that in their country, 90% of the young people who graduate from high school go to college, and it's free. And we in the United States have a long way to go in that regard, and we're falling behind the rest of the world in terms of the education of our young people. Let me provide an overview of what things we're going to cover. First of all, talk a little bit about the problem and getting to really what's the heart of the issue here. Talking about what we've done in North Carolina, because that's what I was asked to do, is talk about our response to this whole college access challenge. Review a little bit the site in North Carolina, examine the results, because everyone wants to know what difference has this investment made, and I think we can speak to that. And then talk about some new initiatives that, as we've gone through this process, and our site came up in 2001, so this is not ancient history. It's been amazing how this has grown and built. Again, as you listen to my comments, collaboration, and in lieu of what the Commissioner had to say about making this simple, that's important. And in North Carolina, we've tried to keep making this process simple for young people. Next slide. This is a quote that comes from Tom Vander Ark, who's the executive director of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He talks about high school graduation and college access as being the economic development issue for our society. The social justice issue of our times is the most important long-term issue for the civic health of the Republic. I'd like to think that we're doing this in North Carolina for this reason, and I'm sure that's, at least it's there in my heart, and I know most people in education. But when our General Assembly mandated this initiative and built a collaboration, they said it's for economic reasons. I mean, that's primarily the reason we're doing it. Next slide talks a little bit about, and this goes back to the Commissioner's comments, Margaret Spellings talked about access to higher education and how it's limited by the complexity of inadequate preparation, students not taking the right courses and being well prepared. Fundamentally, lack of information. They just don't know. There's a mystical process about applying and getting into college and going to college and how much it costs, and opportunities and persistent financial barriers. So it's about money and having financial aid and thinking that it costs a lot more than it do. It's about good information, and it's about students being well prepared. Let's talk about some things here in Texas that are similar to North Carolina. The demographics, how college affordability has really suffered in the last decade or two, and about economic shifts in our society. First of all, demographically. Next slide. Next slide. This shows projection of high school graduates by state. It comes from the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, commonly called WITCHE. They receive from every State Department of Public Instruction the number of young people in the 3rd grade, and the 4th grade, and the 5th grade, and they project nationally growth or decline. This shows between 2001 and 2018, the darker yellow you are, the more you're growing. The darker blue you are, the more you're declining. So Texas and North Carolina are both growing like crazy. Now, coming from a college admissions background, that I'm thinking down the pipe, my job is going to be easy because there are so many more people to draw from. Until you start looking at the racial composition and the fact that most of the growth is taking place in underrepresented populations. Next slide. Here it breaks it down for Texas in terms of your overall public and non-public. Here's where we are right now. Here's where we were. So Texas, like North Carolina, is growing like crazy. About 300,000 students in 2017. That's a huge difference. North Carolina's about 80,000. You're about 300,000. Next slide. The American Indian population will grow, but it's a small player relatively, not a big population. Next slide. Your Asian Pacific Islander, who have actually the highest college going rates in the country, is growing, but again, it's not a big player. When you look at 300,000, it's far less than 10% of your total population. Next slide. Your black, Hispanic, non-Hispanic population is growing and then leveling off. It's at 22,000 now. It'll get up to about 36, so that's a growing population. Next slide. Here's your massive growth is in the Hispanic population, like it is in North Carolina. They're going from about 50,000 students to 150,000 students. If indeed they do graduate from high school and they do go to college, because right now, as a group, they have the highest high school dropout rate and the lowest college going rate. Without significant intervention in providing good information in a timely way, we could lose a generation of young people here. Next slide. This is your white population, and like North Carolina, it's declining, but declining more dramatically from 115,000 down to 100. So it's really about a double-digit decline. So if you were an institution like mine, and mine was 92% white in the mountains of North Carolina, Appalachian State University, our primary market's declining in North Carolina as it is in Texas. You're probably bread and butter in terms of who goes on to higher education in the state is declining rather precipitously. And the growth is coming from populations that are currently underrepresented in higher education, with exception of the Hispanic, which is a relatively small player here. Next slide. Here's what it looks like if you put all those together. Again, here's your white population, and here's your Hispanic. That's almost all of Texas. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Next slide. Looks more at affordability, and this next graph shows you that in 1986, a Pell Grant covered, in green here, the average of the cost of tuition and fees at a public university nationally. It now covers about 40%. So the Pell Grant, even though our president, who's obviously a Texas native, will tell you that the Pell Grant has escalated in terms of how much money is available, and it has not kept up with the cost of higher education, which has escalated so dramatically. So a Pell Grant, which used to cover the entire cost of tuition and fees at a typical public university nationally, now covers about 40-some%. State in blue there, grants for higher education, and these are strictly grants, covered about 75% of the cost of tuition and fees at public universities. It dropped. It has gone up primarily because of, as we well know, lottery programs across our nation. So there's a lot more money available, but it still doesn't match what it was at one time because, again, the cost of higher education has gone up so dramatically. Next slide. And here's the big one for North Carolina, and this is why North Carolina moves so aggressively. It was because economically we're in the state of crisis. This shows how virtually every state in our country is losing manufacturing jobs. North Carolina, the darker red you are, the more jobs you lost during that period between 98 and 03. We're the ones that, in the legend there, were at 25.5%. That was North Carolina. We lost textiles and furniture in a dramatic way in North Carolina. Textiles to south of the border, furniture to basically to China. In fact, right now you can manufacture furniture in China, at least the industries in North Carolina can. Furniture in China with timber from Russia and send it back to the States and still sell it for about 2/3 of what it would cost you to manufacture it in North Carolina. So because of the low cost of labor overseas, most of our furniture industry has gone to China, most of our textiles to Central South America, in Mexico. So an economy in North Carolina that was built on...
I think you might have hit your switch.
I'll put my hand in my pocket again. An economy in North Carolina that was built on in the 40s and 50s and 60s on high wage, low education sort of industry, manufacturing plants. In fact, it was to the advantage of a manufacturing plant to get a student who was still in high school to go to work there because they were younger, they could be trained, and they didn't need a high school degree. No longer exists in our state. Our budget just went down the tubes in the mid to late 90s, literally, because we closed so many plants in the state. So that's sort of what we were up against, and the state realized, next slide, that in order to attract these sorts of industries, which were really our future, because we lost textiles, furniture, and our primary cash agriculture area was tobacco. We've lost a lot of that too. That we had to have a better educated workforce to attract the sort of industry we wanted in our state. Most of those, you have to have some sort of college background to even understand what they mean. Nanotechnology, pervasive computing, pharmaceuticals, and biotechnology were the big growth areas for our state. Well, let's get into North Carolina's response, first of all, and I think we all know this intuitively, here's what's happened to unskilled labor possibilities for people in our American society. In 1950, about 60% of our jobs were for unskilled labor. Next slide. In 1991, only about 35%, and in 2000, next slide, only about 15%. So obviously, some sort of education is required post-secondary for both professional and skilled labor. So it's changed dramatically, not just in North Carolina or in Texas, but throughout our country. Next slide. And we all know, and I think North Carolina knows this as well as any state, the better education you have on the right side here, this is with less than a high school degree, you'll make about $25,000 a year. In professional degree, the median earnings are over $100,000. In fact, and I think this may have been Texas that I saw a college access commercial where it had two young men playing basketball, and one saying to the other, "I'm going to make $1 million." Was that Texas or was that another state? One saying to the other, "I'm going to make $1 million." And the other guy said, "Well, you're not good enough to get into the NBA." He said, "No, I'm going to college, and if you go to college, you'll make $1 million more over a lifetime than you would if you drop out of high school." The same thing's true about unemployment. The more education you have, the less likely you are going to be unemployed. We all know these things. Next slide. Here was North Carolina's response to the crisis. College Foundation of North Carolina is a partnership requested by the UNC Board of Governors, that's the University of North Carolina system, went to the General Assembly and asked them to fund a college access initiative, which they did. In 1999, the General Assembly did. They said, but it won't, the flag will be planted at the University of North Carolina system. You will administer this project, but you will have partners in a memorandum of understanding with K-12, the community colleges, the independent colleges, and the UNC system. That's part of a collaboration. That the system could not do this alone, that everybody has to be at the table when decisions are made. Next slide. That was expanded about a year after we started to include our guarantor, which handles all of our scholarship programs in the state, all of our scholarships for students from low-income backgrounds, for prospective nurses, for prospective teachers. They're all handled out of our guarantor's office, and our loan our nonprofit loan originator, which was founded, I think, back in the 1950s or 60s, that paying for college was an important piece. And if you're going to talk about planning and applying for college and getting to college, you also need to talk about playing. So we expanded the partnership and the memo of understanding. Next slide. What we did with $1 million was, first of all, we decided that the direction we were going in, and this was about 99-2000, was that the way young people were getting information was on the internet. That's where they went. Now, our General Assembly at the same time, older adults, said, first of all, not every kid has a computer at home. And secondly, well, I don't know how to use one, a lot of them said. But also, there is not internet, high-speed internet connectivity in our rural areas. North Carolina's a lot of rural areas. So I said, yeah, you can build some web systems to enhance information, but at the same time, you need to have a resource center and a toll-free hotline. So at the same time we built a web portal, we also developed a resource center, which is housed on the campus of the University of North Carolina in Greensboro, which has the largest counselor education program in the state. They prepare most of our MA and PhD counselors in North Carolina that work in the schools. And they staff that with a toll-free hotline. So if a student has a question about how to get to college or how to get financial aid, or does X college offer a degree program in Y area, they can call here. Well, what we found in the first year that we had literally thousands, tens of thousands of calls to this number because it was marketed real big. But as we've evolved, we get fewer and fewer questions over the telephone, and most of the questions are about where do I go on the website to find that information, because we've done a pretty good job of training school counselors and educators to use our web service. On our web service, it has all these activities. That's what our Resource Center does. And our Gear Up program in North Carolina is also tied into all of this. So every Gear Up student has an account on our web portal. And every Gear Up student goes through a series of exercises on the web portal and has access to a lot of materials and advising through our Resource Center. I know you're going to have tons of questions, so I'll whip through some of these slides quickly and then give you all the opportunity to ask more questions. Next slide. One goal we had is we wanted one site. Again, using the commissioner's words, we wanted to simplify the process. We wanted a one-stop shop, someplace that any young person could go beginning in middle school, throughout high school, and into college, where they knew if they had any questions about college, whether it was 2-year, 4-year, public, private, a certification program, or a 4-year degree, this was where they could go to plan, to apply, and to pay for college. Next slide. Why a web portal? My background's counseling and psychology, and there's one thing I remember from my graduate program a long time ago is the better information people have, the better decisions they make. So again, the web portal is a statewide resource which has lots of good information about college. It's comprehensive, and it takes the students from beginning to do career development in middle school all the way through applying to college and securing financial aid. It's up to date in real time. All 110 of our colleges have real estate on the web portal. So we have some standard information about colleges, but without ever leaving this site, a student can go and see videos about a college, can see pictures about a college, and find out a wealth of information about a college without ever leaving the site. If they choose to, we link to all of our colleges, and all 110 of our colleges participate. That's a requirement of the original Memo of Understanding. So they can update in real time any information. If a private school all of a sudden overnight, because we can't do this in public higher education, develop a pharmacy program or a law school, they can load that into their system immediately, into our system. It's accessible anywhere. It's interactive. A student can store information in a portfolio. It's versatile. Ours has grown exponentially in terms of what we offer. And most importantly, it supports and enables student transitions from middle school to high school and from high school to college. Those transitions are really difficult, and that's where we lose a lot of young people. Next slide. Here's what our site looks like. It's not real sexy. It's not a lot of fun. It's undergoing a makeover right now. But what I want to do real quickly is walk you through some of the services. And you can see the primary services across the top. It's also in Spanish. We have a section for adult learners, a section for financial aid offices on all of our campuses, a section for our Gear Up, both our state and our partnership programs, a school counselor section, and some other tools which I'll talk more about, including SAT and ACT prep. But sort of if you break it down, next slide, students begin typically using this system in middle school. Almost all of our middle school students set up an account. They go to a career center, which used to be just an interest inventory that would match a student's interest with different careers. And that's pretty much what it was. Our school counselors persuaded us that it was not comprehensive enough. So a year ago, we purchased access to the most commonly used electronic web tool for career development in North Carolina, a tool called Bridges. We have a statewide license in the same way that Florida does, and Iowa does, and Utah does. Anyone in their state, whether it's the richest school system in the state or the poorest, can use Bridges now, which again was the tool of choice by our high school counselors. They told us what we should buy because there are a number of different products out there. But now they have a career development center that includes not just interest inventories, but aptitude assessments, personality assessments, curriculum materials that a teacher can use in class, a portfolio that a student develops, a resume builder, just dozens of tools in terms of career development that a student can use beginning really in elementary school. If you go on our site, and ours is cfnc.org, there's actually a tool called PAWS in elementary school, P-A-W-S, which elementary kids can get onto CFNC and match what their interests are with different careers. But again, this is where most people start. And they start with, first of all, finding out how their interests and aptitudes and personalities match careers. But then also the next logical step is what colleges offer degree programs in that field. And what does it take to get into those colleges? So it's very much an integrated, seamless possibility. They start here with careers, but they find out everybody knows about University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill because they're in the Final Four. But nobody knows about the little private college down the street or the community college that's in their own backyard. So again, when a student comes up with a career in, let's say, accounting or electrical engineering, in the website, they can match their interest with a college and a career that's offered, a degree program that's offered by any college. And they're exposed to all colleges that offer that, whether it's engineering technologies or accounting at a 2-year program, because that's what all you need for some jobs. Or it may be a 4-year degree program. But again, they find out about everybody in the state and the wealth of opportunities, not just what University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill offers or Duke Universities, because they're in the newspapers every day. Next slide, the student planner. A student can set up their curriculum and match what a college requires with what course fulfills that requirement at their high school. So the actual course at their high school that fulfills the curricular requirement for a college, they can match here. They can also find about other interest requirements such as GPA, rank in class, or SAT. And in the student planner, there's a separate section on SAT prep. What we found in North Carolina, as I think they have in all states, that SAT is very much tied to socioeconomic background. The more money your family makes, typically the higher you score. You have all the advantages, not only inherently, but also you'll take the SAT 3 or 4 times as opposed to 1 time. You'll take a prep course that'll cost $1,000 or $1,500. Well, and again, to level the playing field for young people, is we wanted to offer SAT prep free to anyone. So we encouraged the company that built our system and has done so for a number of other states to have an online test prep, which they do now, which can be used at home by a student or can be used, and more importantly and more frequently, in school by students and teachers. The college, well, let's do the next slide and see if we have anything. Oh, that shows you where a student can go in and put the courses they've taken and the grades they've made and how that matches up with college requirements. What we're looking at doing in North Carolina, because we have an online transcript system, is this student planner being auto-populated by a student's transcript. Right now, a student has to go in and say, I'm going to take these courses in the 10th grade. That's required that every student do that they have a plan of study. And it's required that their parents look at it and approve it and write a signature. They can do that online now. What our goal is also is to have this auto-populated through transcripts. Next slide. And college test prep. We offer it for free to any student, SAT, ACT, GRE, and a vocabulary builder for students. I've been in schools that use this vocabulary builder with a word of the day. Over the announcements every morning in school, they have an announcement, the word for the day is taken from cfnc.org, such and such. Next slide. Finding the right college. Comparative views, campus tours, and a matching assistant. Well, first of all, comparative views. Think about what it costs to go in Texas to Texas A&M. That's one cost figure. University of Texas, another. North Texas, another. Community College, another. Baylor or Rice, another. And if you want to, as a young person, find out how much it costs, where do you go? Well, you can go to their websites. But if you go to their website, it may be in the cashiers section. It may be in the bursar section. And kids are saying, what the heck is a bursar? Maybe in the financial aid section. Maybe in the admissions section. And if you pick it up in the guidance counselor's office, also offer brochure or catalog, is probably outdated. Imagine if you could go to one place and find it in the same place for all schools in the state. Well, you can do that with this system because, again, it's built for a student to compare colleges and universities. And you can build this comparative view however you want to. You can build it saying, this is the enrollment. This is the percentage of students on financial aid. This is the male-female breakdown. This is the number of degree programs you have. The student can go to one place instead of 110 places to find out basic information. The matching assistant, what that will do, and there are lots of systems out there that do if a student says, I want a co-ed school that's small, that's a public university in a metropolitan area, where most of their kids are like me, they're going to be on financial aid. You can input that data and it will tell you the schools that match your profile of interest. It'll tell you the students that match 100%, 90%, 80%, 70%. So it can match your interest and your specifications and requirements with the colleges that offer those programs. You could say, I'm interested in accounting. Well, that's going to eliminate probably at least 30 or 40 schools in our state that don't offer that. So again, finding out what's available in the state through the colleges, and again, all the colleges have equal real estate on this site. And the student who wants more depth and comprehensiveness of information, if they can't find it here, can automatically go to the college site, link to it. Next slide. Here's one key, and let me tell you a little story about online applications, and I know you have a common application here. My oldest son has gone to college. I was a director of admissions. My wife is the dean of admissions. So he had a lot of advantages in terms of understanding the college application process and what you needed to do. But, and this was a few years ago, like 5 or 6 years ago, he's finally out of college. And he was a very good student. But his priorities were not applying to college during his senior year. In fact, we had, and I love to tell the story, about how we had about 50 applications sitting on our dining room table for about 6 months. Because we took him to visit schools in the spring and summer before his senior year. We got applications. We gave him every opportunity. They sat on the table, but he was busy playing tennis, and he was busy going out with girls, and he was busy doing all the other things at 18. Finally, about December, he started filling out applications. I told that story to a superintendent one time and his staff of principals in Eastern North Carolina, very, very poor district, and he said, well, what you've got to understand is it's a different world between what your son did and what our kids do. He said, at least you had a dining room table for your son to put the applications on. And he said, we don't get a whole lot of support from a lot of times our parents because it's not that they don't want good things for their sons and daughters, they just don't understand the process. So simplifying the application process is critical. A student should not have to, especially among public universities, fill out, in North Carolina, 16 different applications for admission. And I know you have a common application here, but a student should be able to go in, and the account that they set up in middle school and have tracked through high school should be able to auto-populate an application for admission. Our system does that. Your system, you have a common application, so a student could fill out the data one time and send it to almost all of your public universities or all your public universities. Again, one advantage we have is it's a building process between middle school, high school, and to college, and it auto-populates their application that's accepted at all 110 schools, public, private, 2-year, and 4-year. It also auto-populates the FAFSA, about a third of it. So when a student goes into College Goal Sunday, or in our state, FAFSA Saturdays we have, and we have tens of thousands of students who attend those. Most of those are in computer labs. And a student can go in, and all of them typically have CFNC.org accounts, and that will auto-populate all of the biodemographic information on the FAFSA. It auto-populates their loan applications, and there's lots of information where you can ask online questions. The other piece that people forget about is transcripts. And we assume that that's not a difficult process to get a transcript sent. But if you're a student who's never had a conversation with the school counselor or registrar, and you have to go in there, and when you get there you find out you have to have $5 to send your transcript, and you have to fill out a formal request, that's just one more hurdle or stumbling block for young people. In this system, in our system in North Carolina, when a student applies for admission and completes the application, it asks them if they'd like to send a transcript. If they say yes, it's automatically sent to a college. Now, we are not where we'd like to be in terms of 100% because we're converting, our K-12 is converting from an old student information system to a new one called North Carolina WISE, NC WISE. When all of our schools are up on that system, we have one common transcript with the same grading and weighting system in North Carolina and a repository. We will have a repository of all transcripts. Right now we have about half of our schools that are up on that system. Quite frankly, the other piece, which I want to mention here because it's one thing to have an online application come to a campus, but a number of campuses early on would just print that out and then load it into the system. All of our campuses have developed upload solutions now, especially our 16 because 14 of us, I thought it was 15, 14 of us are banner schools. North Carolina State and University of North Carolina Chapel Hill are PeopleSoft schools. Chapel Hill's just going into PeopleSoft right now. But transcripts is the same thing, and right now, because Banner, SunGard did not have a screen where we could upload an entire high school transcript, what we have done in North Carolina is built a screen, our technology staff at the University of North Carolina system. So at 14 of our 16 public universities, not only will the transcript get there and have a paper fulfillment, it will upload into Banner, the Banner Student Information System. So we'll have, basically in a college admissions office, what we did when we got a transcript is we would key in rank in class, because that's important as a predictive variable, GPA, whether or not they have the right courses that are required for admission to the university system, we key that in. But now we will be able to upload the entire transcript into our student information system. And we'll begin doing that this fall. So what was paper fulfillment in terms of electronic transcript is now truly an upload fulfillment. That those K-12 schools that are North Carolina WISE And our banner institutions will have upload capabilities of the transcript beginning this fall. We will build that functionality for our independent colleges because, again, we're a collaboration, but they're on a number of student information systems from Datatel to Genzabar, and we have to build up upload solutions for them. Next slide. Here's an NC State application, which, again, is auto-populated. And NC State historically had their own online application with a recruitment system they had built for their campus. They still use that online application if a kid goes straight to NC State. But if a young person goes to cfnc.org and fills out our application, it automatically uploads at NC State too. I think a classic example, which I was mentioning this morning to another group, was Wake Forest University. It's a very prominent private institution in the state. They used as their online application our application solely for about 5 years. They just asked us, because they were part of, a memorandum of understanding, they would use ours exclusively. They have gotten more and more every year students from outside North Carolina and more students who use the common application. Not the common application as in Texas, but the common application that a lot of New England schools use and highly selective schools. So if you go to the Wake Forest website, you can use the CFNC application or you can use the common application. So if a student applies to Vanderbilt and Wake Forest, they'll probably want to use the common application because both schools use that. If they want to apply to Chapel Hill and Davidson and the University of North Carolina, they'll probably use the CFNC application. That's how they would be advised by their school counselor. Next slide. Transcripts, obviously I went over that already. Again, the students ask where, with a drop-down list, they want their transcripts sent when they apply for admission. Next slide. Paying for college, it's huge. All the applications for the statewide scholarship grant programs and loan programs are there, as is in the next tab the College Savings Program, our 529 program. So I said we have 2 million student accounts. Some of those accounts are grandparents who are setting up 529 plans for their sons or daughters. So it truly is not just in terms of paying for college loans and scholarships, it's also savings programs. Next slide. We converted our entire, not our entire website, but all the static portions into Spanish because what we found is parents of Hispanic students were not using the site, and they said, we don't use it because we don't read English. If you put it in Spanish, we'll use it. So our Gear Up dollars, because we have such a burgeoning, growing Hispanic population in a lot of the counties they're serving, they paid for us to translate the site, the static portions that parents use most likely, into Spanish. Next slide. This is something that's unique to North Carolina, and I don't know how much I need to tell you, but if a student gets turned down, let's say they applied to Chapel Hill and Duke and Davidson, they're highly selective schools, and come April they don't get into any of them. What a student can do is say, I want to go through the redirection pool, and their counselor will advise them to do that. Their application can be observed by any college in the state, and those colleges can recruit students from there. They can say, we'd like you to apply to Campbell University or Barton College or Salem College or Davidson Community College because you meet our requirements. So it's an effort on the part of the General Assembly to say, if a kid, they hear complaints all the time that a kid can't get into Chapel Hill. Well, there are lots of other campuses they can get into, and through this redirection pool, this was a legislative mandate to expose students to other options if they've been turned down by their top choice or their top two choices. Next slide. This is something we picked up from colleagues of ours in Ohio. They had what they called their college access A's, and they said if you do these 4 things, you'll improve access. If you build aspirations, hit the next button there. We do that through our career planner. If you, number 2, if students take the right courses, they'll get into college. We do that through the student planner. 3, if students understand that college is affordable and that it really doesn't cost as much as they think, they can find that out through our Paying for College module. Availability of programs through our college fair. All 110 colleges are there, and we added a fifth A to this because we felt like the application process was a real stumbling block for kids, and you can do that through online applications for admission, for transcripts, and for financial aid. So the process has been streamlined. Next slide. Here are the results, and I guess I'll wait to the end and answer questions since I'm almost there. Here's the sort of usage we have. 2 million accounts, 1 million online applications, 12,000 visitors per day, averaging about 16.5 minutes. When we purchased for our web portal this new career development site, we went from about 5,000 to about 12,000 users a day. And that's primarily because school counselor said we want this career development tool, and if you give it to us, we'll use it. And our usage is about doubled in the last year. Next slide. Here's what's happened in North Carolina with the participation rates for students from the lowest income backgrounds. It's gone up. Here's where we started in 2001. It's gone up every year and sort of leveled off a bit this past year. If you want to compare that nationally, next slide. This comes from Tom Mortenson's data nationally on change in college participation rates for students from the lowest incomes by state. North Carolina this past year ranked #1 in terms of the increases. Texas was in this top group of states that increased. Most states in the nation as a whole have gone down in college participation rates. So with everything going on out there in terms of helping young people get to college, on average, we've dropped about 3.8% as a nation in terms of young people going to college. Only a handful of states have made improvements there. And that's just 1 year's data. Last year we were third, I think, or fourth in that data. Next slide. We do a lot of marketing, and I've got some marketing slides I can walk through to show you what our marketing plan was. But in our last research study that was done by the agency that does our advertising, 80% of high school and middle school parents are aware of CFNC.org. And again, it's the only place in North Carolina. We don't have 4 or 5 websites for college access. We have one. And we've invested everything in that one site. And of those who know about the site, 84% plan to use it. People always ask what's the other 16%. Probably people going out of state or their sons or daughters aren't going to college. But basically, everybody knows about it and everybody uses it. Next slide. This is why it works. Collaboration. We had to have flexible technology because we've expanded it. We do a ton of training, and I'll talk about that. Marketing has been key. It's constantly evolving and changing. I've got a slide on new initiatives. It's amazing some of the new things that are coming up. And every decision we've made, every key decision, when we come to the table quarterly with all of our partners and we say we're thinking about this next piece, the first question is asked is, how does it benefit students? Not does it benefit the University of North Carolina, not does it benefit Duke University, not does it necessarily just benefit K-12, but what does it do for students? Next slide. I think we're closer to 5,000 now school counselors that we've been trained. We constantly work with admissions officers and train them on how to use the back end and how to upload applications and now transcripts, but also how to develop their real estate on the side. A lot of work in the last year and a half with superintendents and principals. We start out by training counselors, and what we found is counselors love it, but a lot of times they don't have the juice when it comes to major reform in the school, and you really have to get a principal on board in the school or a superintendent. And we're doing now more training with a district than we are just for school counselors. Our real thrust in training this past year has been going into a school district and training not just counselors, but directors of guidance, directors of curriculum, teachers, how to use this site in the classroom, and others. A lot of work with school boards, and we have a governor's education cabinet in North Carolina, and we work with them on a quarterly basis too. Next slide. We've done tons of marketing, TV, radio, print, billboards, collateral materials, and public service announcements. I've got some videos of TV advertisement we've done on another set of slides that we can go into. Next slide. Here are the new initiatives, and I want to talk about some of these a little bit because this is kind of the direction we're going in. And I know I'm throwing a ton of stuff at you, but I'm glad to come back for another visit if you have questions about any of this. North Carolina's received a lot of funding from the federal government and from foundations to disseminate information, and also corporate dollars to disseminate information on a web portal, because I think there's a strong contention nationally now that a lot of solving this problem is about good information and making sure that students have it at the right time. So we're glad to do that. But again, the Spanish initiative I've mentioned, we are developing right now and we're beta testing it in schools this year, a senior curriculum for college planning. We did it in cooperation with a group called College Summit out of Washington. I think they may have had a program here in Texas somewhere, one of the big cities. But it's an actual curriculum where a student goes to class once or twice a week for 45 minutes, and they do what you need to do to get ready to go to college and to apply to college and apply for financial aid. It takes them through all the steps that you do at home. Our K-12 agency has asked us just within the last few months to develop a curriculum for middle school that does the same thing, because our big problem in North Carolina, and they keep reminding us, is not getting seniors to go to college, because we rank 3rd in the country in terms of the number of seniors who go to college. We rank 42nd in the country in terms of the number of 9th graders who go to college. We have a huge dropout problem. So their point is, let's start doing this college planning back in middle school, and we have this thing called advisor-advisee sections in our middle schools and freshman academies, where students should be learning about how to plan for college if they're not getting that at home. So we're developing a college planning curriculum for middle school as well as for the senior year. We've also developed lesson plans that take CFNC into the math classroom and into the English classroom, and have about 50 of those lessons that match the standard course of study in North Carolina. I don't know if this is true in Texas, but in North Carolina, almost every school has these day timers for kids. You know what they are, planners. I mean, it's really a phenomenon that I was not even aware of until about 6 or 7 years ago in admissions, and it seemed like every student who came into my office had a planner where they learned in middle school and high school that if they're going to do their homework correctly and other things, they need to plan their activities. It's just like a day timer that we all have. What we have done is, with the agency that does that in North Carolina, as we've said, as well as making that unique for a middle school or high school, we'd like for you to put college planning information in that day timer. And we'll provide the information, and what we did was they sold it. They have their own salespersons, but now they have a planner with college planning information. Like for 11th grader, you need to sign up for the PSAT during this week. You need to do test prep on CFNC.org during this time period. You need to apply for financial aid during this period of time. And it's all in their day timers, and they actually sold 75,000 of those in North Carolina in the first year this past year. I mentioned earlier this morning we started a college application week in North Carolina. That was, the first year was in 15 schools, last year it was in 110, and next year every high school in North Carolina, according to the governor, will have a college application day during what we call in North Carolina College Application Week. In North Carolina, a lot of kids will apply in September and October before November to college, to the highly selective schools. Again, it's the kids who come from backgrounds where their parents encourage that. But every school in North Carolina this coming year, for students who don't necessarily apply early, will have a college application day where they will have their computer labs set up and students well prepared during the school year to explore colleges, to explore careers, to find out what colleges they get into, so that when college application week comes, and a lot of principals have this as a goal, and we think it's very exciting as superintendents, every senior will apply to college. Now, not every senior will probably go to college, but since it doesn't cost to apply to community colleges in North Carolina, and they're open door admission, every young person should be accepted to some college and should easily have their transcripts sent. We hope to do the same thing with pushing schools to have as one of their accountability metrics, again, K-12, not only will every student apply, but every student will apply for financial aid. So at the end of the senior year, not every student will go to college, but every young person in North Carolina, and this is already true at a dozen or more schools, every senior is going to apply to college. And the goal is for every senior to apply for financial aid. Now, that's a lofty goal, but again, it gets right to, again, making sure that young people have options. And the College Application Week will be statewide next year. With our College Access Challenge grants this year, we're building a transfer articulation system into CFNC.org so a student can take their transcript from the community college, put it into the system, and find out how their courses transfer to any of the 110 colleges in the state, which we think is huge. First year it will be, and we've got all the specs done already, and a commitment from the federal government that we can use our challenge grant for this purpose. Our president, the president of the community college system, really believe that a lot of this next wave of students will go to community colleges because they can stay at home and it's a lot cheaper. So we need to create a seamless process between the 2-year schools and the 4-year school. As a former admissions person, the single most important buying motive for a transfer student is how are my credits going to transfer? How many credits am I going to get? Well, in year 1, they'll be able to see 2-year public to 4-year public. Year 2, transfer of credits anywhere, 2-year, 4-year, public, private in the state. And then in the 3rd year, and this is the real exciting part for me because I worked with advising when I worked on a campus, is there'll be a true articulation for the campuses that have degree audit. A student will be able to go into this system and find out not only how many of my credits transfer, but how do they fit into a degree program in sociology, in history, in business, in nursing, whatever it might be. So again, a true articulation system, which we will have that up this fall, the first stage of that. All of this, and we've been hearing this forever, all of the purpose in North Carolina of doing this is to make sure that we have the right training for the young people who are coming up through the system in its workforce development. We have recently been and had our 3rd conversation with a group called WIRED, and it's a federal grant program throughout the country where the goal is building a web portal for workforce development. Let me try to explain that real quickly. They want to build a portal that allows students in their senior year in high school, community college, or university to be aware of what jobs are available in the state. Well, that technology is exactly what we do for students getting to college. So we're looking at the expansion of that so students, once they graduate, can actually apply to business using a common application, can send their transcripts in a PDF certified format, and also industry from outside North Carolina can come into our workforce development portal, which we hope will be CFNC.org, and see how many electrical engineers are graduating this year and next year, how many accountants there are, how many people are studying in a 2-year program in biotechnology or getting a 4-year degree in biotechnology or pervasive computing. So again, that's sort of the next wave, and we're real excited about it because there's a lot of federal dollars, and they really love just our career development tool. They're using that like crazy now, and we feel like they'll be a big co-brander with us in the future. And again, our goal is to get people education because there are a lot of reasons they need education, none the least of which that they can find a job when they get to the end of the pipeline. Again, I've thrown a ton of stuff at you. I'm glad to try to answer any questions that you have. I'm a little bit over my hour, but ask questions, and if we have time, we have some great marketing slides that we can get to in just a minute. But let me break here, and if it's okay, Matt, and try to answer questions.
Yeah, we have. We'll take as many questions as people have. Because
Matt, what's your budget?
We were appropriate, and that's a tough question for me to answer.
Well, I was really being facetious in terms of, the level of, I don't think anybody around this table or listening is going to be opposed to this concept or feel like this isn't something that would be incredibly beneficial to all of us. And so now my only question is the dollars and cents.
Well, we built our site over 2 years in 2000, 2001, and we had to spread it over 2 years because the $1 million that we were appropriated, that's about what it cost to build the site. We were doing other things besides the site. So that $1 million now that we get from the General Assembly, it's a reoccurring item, is about $800,000 because of budget declines, but we've leveraged other resources. Like K-12 provided a school counselor for us. The independents have done some things for us. Our Loan Corporation and Guarantor Agency has done a lot of our marketing for us because we just didn't have the dollars for that. So what it really has done is leveraged a lot of resources from other agencies. The biggest of which, and I don't think there's any way to quantify it, is, besides marketing, is people power. The K-12 people that work on this with task forces with us on curriculum development. The colleges and universities that are constantly updating their real estate on the site. The K-12 people who send their counselors and teachers to training for this. It's hard to quantify. In fact, somebody asked me that question earlier this morning. I came up with a figure that's probably outrageous. But direct cost, I think we spend several million a year on marketing. But about, in terms of the site, it's probably now less than $500,000 on the actual site, the maintenance of the site. But again, that doesn't cover everything that everybody does. The marketing is a big ticket item. And I was saying this morning to the Deputy Commissioner, I really don't think people come to this site because of marketing. I think they come to it because the counselor drives them to them during the school day, or the teacher does, or the TRIO counselor, or the Gear Up person says, we're going to spend some time on this. That's why this usage is so high. Marketing has done a lot in terms of brand identification and people realizing, and we had a very deliberate 4-year plan for how we rolled out the marketing of this, but that's been a big ticket item and very expensive, and quite frankly, a lot of the money that we've used historically for that is no longer there. The federal government has decreased the amount of money that's available through our guarantee agency for use on this, so I don't know where that's going to go, but again, I would be less concerned about that than I am about our training program with counselors and teachers and educators, because that's what really drives it. That's what makes it go. And our relationship with the colleges. You've got to have both. If K-12 doesn't buy in, you don't have the build-up. If higher ed doesn't buy in, and your admissions directors and registrars and everybody else, financial aid people, buying in, then the student gets to higher ed and there's no place to go in terms of this system. Other questions? Yes?
You had one section that was addressed to adult learners. I was curious if you, in the planning of this model, if there have been discussions about trying to also reach undereducated and employed adults.
Quite frankly, our emphasis early on was with young people in school, but that has been a huge push. And that's part of the reason our transfer articulation has come to the forefront, because so many people in our state have credits, in college credits, but they don't know how they fit into programs. So that's a major initiative, and this very agency has pushed us real hard on that, is that we're not doing enough. And we have is it non-traditional? It's adult learner we have. And that shows them basic information. Who on a campus can help them? What sort of evening courses and weekend courses do campuses? It's some basic information, but it's not nearly as interactive as what we have for K-12. But that's, I think, an area that, especially since we've joined forces with this agency, is an area that we're pushing on. And a lot of it is career development for displaced workers and doing more. And we have the tool for that, but moving them from career development to a college is another thing. And we've got to fit the pieces in there. But it's a good question and a great opportunity.
Question over here.
Same line of questioning. You said transcripts can be populated into someone's account if they got a GED. Would there be any way to...
That's a good question that I've never been asked, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't think we have that capability yet, but it's certainly, every place I've ever visited, I've had a question that I need to explore when I get back, and I certainly will that one, because that's the primary thrust within our state is for high school dropouts to get GEDs, and they should be able, I would think.
Well, there's no transcript, but at least it's a pass or fail. The information would be there for the application.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's produced electronically by the agencies that. But I can certainly go back. We're not currently doing that. In fact, right now we're pretty much K-12 to higher ed. Our community colleges are in the process of all converting to DataTel. And when that's finished, we'll be doing a lot more with 2-year to 4-year in this transfer articulation. But that's going to happen over the next few years. Most of our work has been done K-12 to higher ed, whatever level, with transcripts. Yes, sir.
You said your system's been around since 2001, so it's still relatively new. I'm assuming there was a series of predecessor systems that existed throughout the state. Did you see a consolidation of them, or did you see an integration of those systems into this?
Yeah, we had one major integration. We had a state system for planning and applying to college and one for paying to college. We integrated those two about 1.5 years after we started. And again, that was because we kept hearing in focus groups, why do you have 2 different 800 numbers? Why do you have 2 different websites? When we think about planning for college, we're also thinking about paying for college. So, and that was not an easy thing. And in Texas, I know you have a lot of these tools out there already. Getting everyone to come to the same table and putting those resources together, the bigger a state is, the more complicated it is, I think. But it certainly is possible. We're the 11th largest state in the country, and it's happened there.
Well, Jacob's question of how exactly you did it, and maybe you can address that with talking about the career planner, and you went out and looked at what people were using with that tool too.
What we have done with the company that developed this software is we've pushed them real hard to be partners with whatever the state needs. We knew we wanted the Bridges career development tool years ago, but that was a different agency in Canada. And the two of them could never get together about integrating for a state their web portals. And what the company in California did is they bought the company in Canada. So we're able to do that now. But that's not always going to happen. And what we're doing, for example, with transfer articulation is that's a company, also a company in Canada. But the parent company that developed this software, they have become much more open to partnering with other systems because they can't do everything. They can't do transfer articulation. That's not in their business model. But they can help that company build something that to a student it doesn't look any different. This SAT prep tool is a completely different site, but a student doesn't know that.
You were saying that you worked with the schools themselves when you've been rolling that out, because the districts and schools currently, we'll get into the survey of Texas superintendents, use a number of different products. And
yeah, what we did is, again, we surveyed schools and they said your career development tool is good, but it's very limited. Here's what we would recommend. And we surveyed school counselors to see what was the most recommended tool. Well, we knew what it was. And we purchased that for the entire state because what we found is the wealthy school districts pretty much had the tool. The poor districts didn't. And we, again, wanted the tool to be used statewide and integrated with our web portal. So we went and found the money to pay for it for every school in North Carolina. And quite frankly, we did it at a much reduced rate. Schools were spending tens of thousands of dollars. And we paid for it in one lump sum. And don't ask me how much that was because I don't know. And to tell you the truth, it'd probably be much more for Texas because you're such a bigger state. But again, it more than doubled the use on our site because, again, it was something that counselors were pushing. They wanted a tool not only that did career development, but helped them track what a student was doing, and that tool did that. It showed a counselor if a student did the interest inventory or the aptitude assessment electronically. And what this tool will show a student in Rhode Island this fall is a counselor can go in and see what colleges they've applied to, where they've sent their transcript, where they filled out a FAFSA. In North Carolina, we'll begin doing that in the spring of 2009. Rhode Island just happens to be the first state that's doing this because they're building a new site. But they were a state, for example, that had a statewide bridges tool. And they wanted more than that. They wanted an application tool and some other things. So they recently, within the last year, purchased this tool. There are a lot of states that have tools like this. Oklahoma has a great one. Georgia has a good one. Tennessee has a good one. Kentucky has a good one. And actually, there's some other models out there that use different technology. Florida has an articulation system called FACS. And I found that out when I visited there, and they built their whole system around that. But they also use the same career development tool that we do within their system that they built themselves. We looked at building a tool like this ourselves, and our technology people said, there's no way we can do this. And we looked at a lot of different vendors. We looked at vendors that provided college applications. We looked at vendors that did career development. We looked at vendors that did SAT prep, and we decided we need one tool, a one-stop shop. And that's why we settled on this one, because they told us that they would provide the platform for the technology and allow us to add some things to it that we desperately wanted. And again, other states wanted too. But then there's some things North Carolina wants that no other state wants, like this redirection pool. I mean, I don't know of another state that's done that yet. It makes perfect sense to me, but I'm from North Carolina, and I know the problems we had there. Other questions?
I wanted to ask a clarification question. The clarification, you were saying Rhode Island, so talk about another state, but that a high school counselor can know in real time whether an individual student has submitted an application, has submitted a FAFSA?
Yes.
Okay.
If they go through this system.
If they go through the system, then they'll know in real time.
And actually, to tell you the truth, we've already built it for our system in North Carolina, and we'll be using that this fall before we get the company's version, the ZAP version in January. But our counselors, if a student applies through CFNC, will be able to see that application. A counselor will be able to see it when the student applies. And again, to counselors, they've lost a little control here. They used to, when a student came in and said, I'm applying to so-and-so, in many cases they'd say, well, give me your application. I'll put it in an envelope with your transcripts. Because that's how we wanted to get it in an admissions office. We didn't want to get a transcript over here and an application over here. So in some ways, if a student's doing this, they've lost a little control. They've been pushing us since this inception to give more reporting capabilities. And we've pushed the parent company real hard on this. They're rolling out this product this fall, and any state who wants it can have it. We will get it for beta testing in January of 2009. We're a little bit of a horse of a different color for this company that developed the software because we host it locally. Most of these states work with what's called, with its parent company, it's called an ASP, an all services provider. I think that's where they host the data there in Culver City, California. But we moved to a locally hosted system, which I hear probably would fit better for Texas anyway, a locally hosted system.
So does a student in the in this system then, do they give permission to share? Do they have to give permission to share their information?
That's part of the reason that we wanted to host it locally. When you have a third party hosting it, yes, you would absolutely have to. But in our mind, and again, I'm getting way outside of my pay grade when it comes to not just technology, but to FERPA and the legality of this. But our attorneys have said if it's school information, that they should automatically have to it. When a student fills out an account now, it asks them if they would be willing to share their data, which 95% of them say yes, they would, with their school counselor. And we've been asking this for years with college campuses. As a former admissions director, I get tens of thousands of prospects of kids who go to this tool in the 9th grade when they're doing career planning and looking for colleges, and they say, well, look, Appalachian offers criminal justice. I want to go to work for the FBI. Or I want to do CSI. That's the popular thing now. Well,
Everybody's going to be.
I can begin communicating with that kid in the 9th grade as opposed to waiting until they're in the 11th grade and take the PSAT, and I purchase their name through the college board. Literally tens of thousands of prospects come straight to my campus early on. And there is an opt-out, opt-in. Just like with the SAT, a student has to say, yes, I agree that I would like to share my data with colleges. Now, again, on the K-12, the way I understand it, because we just went through a huge debate about this, from my perspective, a kid's high school transcript is the school's information, that they own that as well as the student. And a counselor would forward that to us, so the counselor should have access to that information.
Are you getting
And
that?
again, you'll have to look at state law and requirements in federal law, but right now, as I understand it, when a student goes into the system, they say, do you have our permission for your school counselor to have access to your data when they get ready to send their application and transcript.
And is that the way it works with the redirection also? I mean, do they have to then check off to have their application
Absolutely.
redirected? Or
They would not go into that unless they were willing to share their information with other colleges that might be interested in them.
So who else has access to the student data?
The educational agency and the colleges and the universities. That's it.
Do you ask for a parent waiver of that release or just student?
No, that was part of the problem and part of the reason we wanted it hosted locally. If, again, a third party was doing it, there's an age limit below which a student cannot, without permission of their parents, be engaged in Internet. We wanted sixth graders
Right.
to use this during the school day, but legally they couldn't because it was provided by a third-party vendor. But if it's locally hosted by the state of North Carolina, its educational agencies, we were able to secure access to those students. That was one of about 4 or 5 driving factors. Now, from my perspective, and the parent company might be very...
they're watching, I'm sure.
They're saying they have built a business model which involves an ASP. We have pushed them out of that model to a locally hosted enterprise solution, and that was not an easy thing for them to do, but they have done it. They did it for us. And I feel certain as other states mature with their web portals, like I know they are, they're eventually going to want to own that data rather than necessarily a third party hosting it. I mean, it just worked for us in North Carolina, but that's something that as you look at an RFP, you may want to consider. I don't know, Texas may be interested. Florida, so that's the only way they do it, is if they hosted the data. And usually what I found is that's true in bigger states, because bigger states have the infrastructure to support this. Whereas I was in New Mexico last week, and they just don't have the personnel. They need to get up quick on a system like this. They need something that has servers, has programmers, has web developers that can build their site for them outside the state. We still get all the basic functionality from ZAP, but we have a black box in North Carolina which has the code in it. Yes?
What's your common identifier for these students between the I guess the application to the funding?
That's a really good question, and I wasn't even aware of the answer to that. Now, when I worked on a college campus and we got SAT tapes, we had that issue because not all students would put their Social Security number when they took the SAT or when they filled out our application. It's optional on both. But we were able to do it by name, by high school, by date of birth, by a number of different, we match by a number of different characteristics. In North Carolina, every student in K-12 has a student ID identifier that carries all the way through K-12. Now, we don't use that in higher education yet. I don't know why. But one problem our students have had, and again, this is a little bit more complex than I want to get into with you all, but students, when they were applying for admission, were filling out the application, and then it would ask if they wanted to send their transcript, and it would ask for their student identifier number. Well, a lot of kids don't know what their number is because it's not the sort of thing they use every day. So a lot of kids are still sending paper transcripts because they get stopped right there. And we're working right now on the solution to that very problem is we have a secure site. Why does the student have to go to a student identification number? Why can't they, with their name, their birth date, their high school, match with a repository that has their transcript? But again, that's my question at 30,000 feet. I don't know what the answer is technologically.
They're logged into the whole system anyway.
There's a solution somewhere out there, and that's what we're pushing our staff on is, why didn't somebody tell us this problem? But there are literally hundreds of kids out there who went to a paper version because they didn't know their number. Well, the first solution was we need to train our students, they said, to remember their number. Well, we've got 110 school districts, and they're not going to all train in the same way kids to remember their ID numbers. My solution is, I mean, if they're on a secure website already and you have a lot of identifiers, why can't you match those? I mean, that's the 30,000 feet question.
Well, it would solve your problem there, but then if you're looking at workforce development in adults, that's not going to transfer because they may or may not, with the immigrant population, have any link to K through 12. So your common identifier needs to start at some point when they enter education. So if you had one all the way through.
Well, it's on our list of topics for our next conversation with our advisory group that includes K-12. Other questions? Yes.
Joe, you talked about training the counselors out there in the field. Who pays for that training and who actually performs the training?
We pay for the training out of the grant that we got originally. The person who performs the training is what's called a school counselor on loan to our office. We've had the same one for the last 4 years. When we first started this endeavor, we went to K-12 and said, they had a program called Teachers on Loans, where the best teachers that were identified through the entire state stopped working for their school for a year, and they go out and help other teachers learn about what they do to make themselves good teachers. Well, we asked if they would do that for a school counselor. We've had 3 different ones over the last 6-7 years. We've had the last one for 5 years. We just went out and hired a second one, and we used Gear Up money to do it. We use Gear Up money because a lot of our work is in Gear Up schools and training what are called Gear Up coordinators to use this site. So we were able to justify with the federal government using federal dollars to hire a trainer. The person that we hired is a former school counselor. Both of them are. We knew from experience we couldn't go out there as university people and have a great deal of credibility in terms of what happens in the day-to-day life of a school counselor. So we have hired school counselors to do that. And again, early on it was a K-12 contribution to this endeavor. Lately we've used some other resources too because the demand has magnified, multiplied.
What would you say is your budget, your annual budget?
And again, I was asked that question and I threw out a number that's probably way too high. I know marketing is for the training piece. Yeah, I don't know, but I could find out. If you'll leave me your card with that question on it, I can find out exactly. They pay for a lunch for them. They use the facilities free because they're on a college campus. We pay for the trainer. She probably makes, I don't know, $60,000 a year. And she trains all over the state. As well as our grant helps her train outside North Carolina, which she loves to do. And what she's developed is a resource manual which she gives to other states where she trains central staff people. It's exactly how to do a training program. What materials you use, how do you notify people, how do you secure a location, what do you do for meals, all that nitty-gritty stuff. It's a real good training program. But again, all of a sudden it's shifted. We're doing less with school counselors generically and more with school districts, and a lot more with teachers. Because counselors said, we can't do all this ourselves. We've got to do something in the classroom. Other questions? Yes.
You've mentioned a couple of times the real estate that colleges have on this portal or in the website. What is the nature of the college's real estate?
Well, first of all, they have the generic pages that we have that give what we call comparative views. And if a student does the matching exercise and matches up with their college, it shows them. But then it takes you to a page, and what I would suggest is you all set up accounts and walk through this. It'll add to our 2 million. But it will show you, there's a screen where you can go for more information, and it can have more detailed information about new programs, for example. You can have videos. Elon College has done a great job with what they've done with their real estate. It can have pictures. We've even thought about, even though we haven't cleared this with our campuses yet, about having some centralized college visit registration process where they could go straight from this site to register for a campus visit. It's really pretty basic, but then again, there's a hot link right there if a student wants to go for more detailed information to the college. We'll never be everything a college can be, but what we are is good, solid, basic information that can help develop their interest and help them compare other campuses. Yeah.
Can you describe your governance?
Again, it's a partnership. There are no major shifts on this without partner approval. Transfer articulation, when we first did this, a couple of our partners said, I don't know if this is our business. So it took a lot of time in talking and persuasion. I don't even know, to tell you the truth, it's always been consensus building among the partners, and everyone's agreed. This workforce development, I know there's several of our partners that are going to scream about that because that's outside their purview.
So you don't have a formal board?
Yes, we do have a board. We have an advisory board.
And all your partners are on the board or not
necessarily? Yes, they're all represented on the board. I've attended for the last 6 years most of those board meetings, but have never seen anything come to a vote. It's always been, this is what we're thinking about. What do you all think? And we've never gone forward without consensus. Now, we're fast getting to the point where there's some projects that take us in a direction which, well, in workforce development is much more complex than we've ever been in before, and I'm not sure how they're going to feel about it. But what I can tell you is the agencies that have primary responsibility for this in North Carolina are very interested because we have such strong name recognition and visibility, and they don't want to build a portal. They want to use ours. And it does make sense in terms of natural transitions, but we've had 3 preliminary conversations. We have not gone to our advisory board yet with that topic, and that's probably scheduled for this fall. But I'm hoping we'll have enough good information because, to me, it's an exciting development. And here's a big reason. There's lots of money there to help with the evolution and development of that part of the portal. Almost at every juncture, as we've developed this portal, we've had to find the money somewhere. And the person who led this project in North Carolina, that was his great gift, is he was about building collaborations and about leveraging resources. This next evolution, for that piece, they've got the money to build their part of the portal. They have it in a federal grant. They just want to tag on to ours and be a partner with us. And to me, it makes perfect sense, because that's why the General Assembly started this to begin with, was to have a better educated workforce. And it would be natural to make sure that they know, these students know what jobs are available, and that also industry knows what we're producing. Other questions?
On your career selection, your aptitude test and personality test, did you use a commercial product or did you develop it yourself?
Commercial product called Bridges. And again, we went with the tool that the vast majority of our school counselors said they liked and used. There were other tools out there, and it may be a completely different market in Texas. I doubt it, but you can find out what what tools are used in the various schools.
Did the other schools migrate into Bridges, or are they still using another?
I think there'll be some schools that will always use a different tool, but it won't be integrated with this product because the director of guidance has bought into it and loves it. But again, the one that they can have for free that saves their system tens of thousands of dollars is right here. And they can use it in its every tool within Bridges, the elementary, the middle, and the high school, and the college and university tool, which is a lot about resume building and that sort of thing.
Joe, who owns it in the state?
That particular tool is owned by the College Foundation Incorporated, which is our loan corporation, nonprofit in North Carolina.
And other tools, are they owned by different parties, or?
The university system, and I guess, I mean, that's where the mentor system is. But again, the servers that it reside on are with the College Foundation Incorporated in North Carolina. We pay the maintenance. We paid for the initial development, but different partners have stepped up and paid for different aspects of this. So in terms of who owns it, I think we kind of all own it, and we're all North Carolina. There's not a partner that
so
we have.
So the contract you have with this corporation is?
With ZAP is through the University of North Carolina system, yes.
For everything, or? But
no, not necessarily.
Not necessarily, for pieces.
For different pieces have come from different places. I was just in Virginia where K-12 paid for an SAT prep because that's what they wanted. But the contract for the mentor system was with the independent colleges and universities in that state. And again, some states have done this a whole lot better than others. And some states have bought this system, and it hasn't been heavily utilized because they don't have the collaboration. There's one thing. I mean, the hard thing about doing this is getting everybody to play in the same sandbox. But if you put what the student needs the most at the heart of it, everybody's got to come. As an admissions officer, I mean, I had my own online application. It worked great. It uploaded into our student information system. Why did I need another one? Well, I was persuaded by a colleague down at the system that, you know, if you really want to help kids, and the problem we had at that university was we had very few low-income kids. We had the lowest Pell participation rate in the entire system. Most of our kids were middle-class, upper-middle-class white kids from the suburbs of North Carolina. And this provided me a pipeline of other young people that probably would never have looked at my school. And it was in our best interest to do that.
You said you received state appropriations. Did it come with strings?
Not that I'm aware of. They haven't pulled any strings except to reduce our budget every time the budget's been cut. But again, fundamental was that it was a partnership. And I can get you the legislative act. We've shared that with a number of states that put this into play. It did not even say you would do a web portal. It said you will engage in college access activities and utilize the internet as one source of information, if I remember the language.
And the collaboration was in the...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And really, we helped the General Assembly write that because we felt like we couldn't do it ourselves at the system level. We were only 16 of 110 colleges, and we had no control over K-12. But we wanted their backing, so we had that written into the legislation.
So two questions. One, when you were mentioning that you could upload a transcript. So if a student decides that they want to pursue a certain career or certain post-secondary program, does that send the information back to the counselor and help populate a student's course of study? And then I guess the second question is one I've forgotten. So
I've already forgotten the first one.
You go. Probably wasn't worth remembering.
Well, there is a student portfolio within the system that a student has ownership of. Everything they do on the site is stored there. The colleges they look at, the career development that they do, the SAT prep that they've done, all of that's stored in their portfolio. So a student knows in middle school, I had an interest in nursing because I took this interest inventory and it's there. Well, I can take that interest inventory again in 12th grade and find out what I'm interested in now. Well, that becomes part of my portfolio, part of my account that I own.
But is it possible to populate a student's course of study, high school course of study, based on what they make a decision on? It can change as their interests change. But
a student is guided in the student planner if they say they're interested in going to the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. It will tell them what courses they have to take in their high school to be eligible for admission there.
Okay.
Exactly the courses in their high school. And again, that's a little easier in North Carolina because we have one standard system.
Right. And then the second is, you'd mentioned the redirect. So that happens after they are, say, rejected, denied admission.
It's open between April and August of a student's senior year.
So is there a reason that it would not make sense to have that information available to higher education, community colleges and universities earlier than that? If they're indicating what their interests are and...
Again, our goal, and we negotiated with the General Assembly Education Oversight Committee, they were the ones that had an interest in doing that. Our colleges told us that let's take the student through the normal process in the fall and winter. But if they come down in the spring of the year, when a lot of colleges notify March and April, that's our final notification. If at that point, going through the normal system, they have not been admitted, then this redirection pool starts. And that was, again, based on the advice of college admissions offices and school counselors who also serve on our advisory boards. And they said, let's have it April to August because it's sort of like, I've tried the normal structure and it doesn't work.
Right.
So I'm going to enter my application into this system and colleges can prospect me at that point.
Was there a reason that none come immediately to mind? Is there a reason why that process couldn't happen much earlier, even in a junior year?
Well, they don't apply until their senior year. Most schools don't begin accepting.
But if this is seen as less of an application and more of a portal,
I'm not sure I understand the question.
In that if a student has an account and it says, here's what I'm interested in and here's what I've done, and it can say, I make myself available to those who may be interested. Similar
absolutely.
And it could be used for prospecting.
Exactly. That happens beginning in 8th and 9th grade when the student says, I'm interested in engineering, and we have 4 schools in North Carolina that offer engineering. Those schools can go in and prospect that student. Yeah, it can happen as early as middle school. Now, application for admission, probably not until their senior year when they apply to school. But absolutely, and that's one of the big benefit to colleges, is they have access to a young person much earlier than they did before. And for me, a student who's interested in a major that I offer as a college admissions person, that's like gold. I can begin recruiting that student and saying, take this course, prep for the SAT, come to visit our campus, see us at your high school visit when we're there for the college fair. All those things that we normally do with high school juniors at the end of their junior year and seniors, I can start doing earlier. So that was a big sales point to a lot of our colleges, is you'll get prospects a lot earlier. But again, the student has to opt into that. But just like when they take the SAT, most of them check, yeah, I'd like to get information from colleges. Other questions?
What has this done to college fairs attendance at the traditional college fairs?
It's been interesting because when we first started this, we, in our region of the state, Northwest North Carolina, we set up, at the time, terminals around the college fair and helped students set up accounts and found out how you started an interest in a dialogue with East Carolina University. Here's a website you can go to. So we actually had college fairs that had terminals that we push students to as part of the college fair process. It has not affected attendance. They still go like crazy. What it has done for school counselors is it's stretched their effectiveness. At one time in schools, the counselor was the one you went to get college information. Well, right now, counselors have caseloads of 400, 500, 600 students. They can't effectively counsel those students, but they can push them to resources like this that provide better information than they ever could because it's much more up to date. If you multiply 12,000 visitors 16 minutes per day, imagine the manpower that you have that's available there, where it's not a counselor having to say, well, you ought to look at Winston-Salem State University because they have physical therapy as well as Chapel Hill. The school counselor might not even know that. But when the student expresses an interest in that, it shows up here that that school has it, and it's only had it for the last 5 or 6 years.
On the auto FAFSA feature, have you tracked over the last 5 or 6 years to see if you've had more students complete the FAFSA earlier in the year? Like at a lot of our community colleges, we have students that are filling the FAFSA as late as July and August, which is pretty late. So are you tracking that to see if not more FAFSA completions, but earlier FAFSA completions? And then secondly, we've been trying to have that in Texas since our current president was governor. So it's been a while since we've tried it. Who's on did you twist to get that auto FAFSA?
One of the biggest weaknesses that we have pushed this company that developed this software on was reporting capabilities. And that's why they're rolling out this new tool that will allow you in a counselor caseload, in a classroom, in the school, in the district, or for the state. It will allow you to track everything. And that's currently available, but it's a difficult tool to use. At least it has been for our staff and staff in other countries. They're developing a new tool that will hopefully do that much better. But that's an excellent question that we have not tracked in a way that really shows us what impact that program has had.
You have the data?
Well, if it goes through this tool, we should have it, and we should be able to extract it because it's all happening within this system. But to answer your question, no, we have not tracked that like we should. But that's a great question that is one of literally dozens that we should be answering right now. Our new president for the system, when he came in, said the first question he had is, yeah, this is a great tool, and I see it all over the place, and I know everybody's using it, but how many Hispanic kids have accounts? Well, we started using this tool to dig down in there to find out, and we got 3 different answers. We need better reporting capabilities, and that's a primary thrust in the near future.
And the auto population, which was, I think, the second part, how did you get that done? Was that done by the company, or?
Yeah, the company had a relationship, an agreement with the federal government. The company that developed our software also does a part of the National Federal Financial Aid site. And so they worked out that arrangement. But that's probably something you could do locally with the federal government, I would say, if you built your own. I can't see why you wouldn't be able to. But this company allows for that process. They have an agreement that auto-populates the FAFSA. Which is, again, that's one key piece, and that's one part of the form. The other 2/3 are the really hard part because that's parental income and all that other stuff. But again, the student starts with a real leg up if they've got part of that auto-populated.
Right.
Yes?
It seems like a real good argument for locally hosting the data would be the one you just mentioned where you're wanting a lot more reporting. If you're hosting the data locally, you have a lot better opportunity to do that.
And again, that was part of one of the reasons we went to this. Now, again, the parent company, they've had changes in leadership, and they really are doing a much better job with a lot of things that we pushed on earlier. But yes, you're absolutely right. More control, more flexibility. We can't change things that are in the basic code, but we can adapt to it as long as it doesn't adversely affect the primary code.
Well, if that's all we have for Joe, we'll just move on real quick. Maybe we may not get through all the agenda items today before people have to leave. But while he's here, we could go through this survey of superintendents, and I think actually I'd like to keep Joe at the table to respond to some of these things as they come up, because there may be questions about that he can answer as we go through this. The coordinating board sent out email and fax to all the Texas superintendents, high school superintendents, about their participation in technology services related to career and college planning. And this is the results we got back. What was the first interesting point about this survey that's not on here is that probably 2/3 of the surveys came back via fax versus email. And so the emails went out, and we got almost nothing. It was just like dead air. And then we sent out the faxes, and they just started rolling in via fax. So I don't know what that says. There's a good study in there somewhere for someone, but yes.
But it says that you don't know there's education service centers out there. And TEA does. If
right.
TEA wants responses from every district, they send one email, and every district responds to every service center, and every service center responds to the state.
There's a chain of command there.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that, starting this, for this to come out from the coordinating board, obviously that was an experiment in itself, going to districts. And I think with members of TA here, we might think about changing this survey, refining it, and doing it again as we go into our specifications process. So this should just kind of provide a general outline of what's out there. We did have 263 districts participate in it, and you can look at the regional breakdown. It's a fairly wide regional breakdown. Some were smaller than others, but the second page is still the regional breakdown. We won't go into the school districts or the name of the school districts, but I have all that information if anybody's interested. And probably as we get this committee established, whatever surveys, I will just give people log-on access so they can see surveys develop as they come in. The question to number 3 of whether or not they used something, we had 58% respondents saying they did and no, and we even had a few saying not sure, which was interesting. We did ask about what products they were currently using, and College Board came up the largest, but that's to be expected. Almost everybody. A lot of people use College Board. It's $300 and something for a school, and it just gives their school access to the basic College Board services. That's a sort of a basic College Board package of planning, but it's not state specific or has any other. The more specific and high powered products are the ZAP products, the Princeton Review, a product called Cooter, and then again, we had a large percentage of families that said none. Back, we actually have on question 4, there's a title. If you flip a few pages, you'll see a graph that's the open-ended responses to question 4. And you can see just the wide array of services that are out there. In interviews I did with focus groups around, we did a few focus groups of current high school counselors, what they would like and what they're using, and some of them just said, well, just pick something, because they get new things all the time, or and there's a learning curve on it, and they would like something that they could get to know, that when they went from a school to school, that they would have the same system, that they, within their network of counselors, because they get together as a group, and a member of the counseling association is actually, Jan Fries is on this committee and maybe watching, I'm not sure, but the general idea is there's a lot of things out there, and there was some were, again, very attached and wrote in about their attachment to whatever product they were using, but many just said it would be great if there was one. Question 5, I think that you can just see that everyone is just kind of on the somewhat useful side for the web services that they're currently using. I think part of the reason for that, or my interpretation of the reason for that, is what Joe showed us, is it doesn't, all these services that are operating, whether they're Bridges or Cooter or whatever, are not actually connecting with the student's real information or with the final, applying for college and paying for college, pre-population, those kinds of powerful things. So
these went to superintendents?
Superintendents who then passed them on. We told them to pass them on to their technology and counseling liaison. So again, maybe the service centers would be a better place to get this out, and we should do that.
Yeah. Many of the rural districts don't have staff, so
right.
It'll end up in a stack like that with the superintendent. So.
Right. And I think you'll find that many of the rural districts were the ones who said we don't necessarily have anything either. So, and so this was whether or not they used a free service, free or paid, and so or promote a free service. And most of them are saying yes, but it's not an amazing amount are saying no. Given that's especially shocking since there is collegefortexans.com out there, which is supposed to be the state's free resource for college planning, and so that shows you, that a high percentage are not, in fact, pushing the state College for Texans. So, question 7 was their opinions about awareness, and you can see that was just somewhat aware. Question 8, large majority said they would use it if free. I think that speaks to what Joe was saying about when districts were maybe attached to some products, but were, if they were paying a buck, or we found in some cases $1.60 a student even for some of the more advanced services, that they might be converted to a state system that was free for them. But we haven't, this group hasn't talked about funding models. They opted to purchase that as a free thing for everyone. That's not been decided here. So those, I don't want to put that out there as something that's been decided. It's not been decided how this will be funded, and so.
So based just on this survey, can we tell roughly how much is being spent by school districts?
Nope. And I think that would be an excellent thing to do a study on and to demonstrate some cost savings for whenever we go out and look at a state system. I think if we're looking for the legislature also to step in with some funding, they would like to know that. But the agencies, I know TEA would like to know that, and maybe I think there's a study going on about expenditures of the high school allotment, and I think you're going to find that some of these products hopefully are ending up in the high school allotment, but nobody seems to know. I think maybe in that next survey. I'm going through this kind of fast, and not offering much input, but we should have plenty of time to talk about it. 9 was the most interesting question and valuable for this conversation, and the results of 9 are the last sheets of the page. So we got a lot of results on this. What you'll find, though, is if you look through them, you're going to find that they group into a lot of the categories that Joe showed they had in North Carolina. Full service, one-stop shopping for preparing, planning, and going to college. Student portfolios come up a lot. Help with the FAFSA comes up a lot. Some specific products come up a lot, but some of these are any type of service as long as it's web-based, easy to use, and accurate. And that sentiment comes up in several places. And then I didn't put this in there, but somebody accused me of loading this one. The very last one is North Carolina has an extremely impressive web portal that is free. I would love to see this available in Texas. And they list the website there. I guess they went and saw your presentation in College Board Forum in New York. But, so you have other ones that are, the system must be user-friendly and individuals and families will be too intimidated to complete. You see, counselors are really looking, if you look at these, for information that is student-centered and student-friendly. So we can take as a committee, take a better look at these and maybe do a better, more complete survey. But to just get our conversation started, I'll throw this out there for discussion. Anybody?
There is a lot of information out there, especially for the state of Texas, in terms of common ID numbers that follow the kid regardless of what district they go to, so that a lot of this information could be populated into another database very quickly. Grades, we have a collection system for grades. It could be centrally located also, so that the kid doesn't have to be reminded that he's got to put that data in. There's a lot of things already in place. My caveat would be, this is as good as how we get to the parents. In the minority community, though the literature may indicate differently, parents care very much about their kids going to college. The problem is that it's a confusing set of standards or what have you that are out there that are bewildering enough that it keeps them from getting interested. If we work more with parents at the local level and make this very user-friendly for kids and parents, I think that you will see a tremendous amount of difference in the number of minority kids applying for college. And too often, and I'm not blaming the universities, but the universities get very esoteric. We know the answers, but we're going to go ahead and throw a question out there. And that doesn't work, because people can see through that. Also at the school district, you have superintendents. I got my degree, why should I worry about anybody else? Here's the information. We got to drill really hard that all those levels in the public school system really get aware about this and how it works and have that buy-in. Because if there isn't buy-in by administrators, teachers won't come along. And if teachers don't come along, obviously the kids won't either. So I know you covered it very quickly about the role of informing or training teachers and administrators. But in the public school sector, I think that will be the measure of success, up or down, if we get those people really excited about this. And one of my programs, we work with counselors. They're dying for information. Even though they feel put upon to be quasi-administrators, many of them consistently tell us, we don't get enough information, enough training, nothing that helps us help kids, because we take them for granted and ignore them for the most part. So I would really, if we got into something like this, I would like to see that we really drill down there and really make this work, because this would be a great asset for kids. Because even minority kids, more of them have computers than you realize. Because they got to play games, so they got to have something, so they do have them. So I really think, and I know you didn't mean to just slide by that because you had a lot of material to cover, but I think we really need to concentrate on that in this state.
Joe, do you have anything to comment on parents?
Well, we didn't get to the marketing piece, and I think that's what got to a lot of parents, and I'm glad to show that marketing campaign we did, because, again, we focused a lot on teachers and counselors, but in terms of broad-based awareness, close to 90% of our parents know what this site is for, and I can show you how that happened with our marketing. If you want to take 5 minutes and do that, or 10.
Sounds fine to me. Just for everybody's information, I'm just kind of by default acting as lead of this meeting, but really it's yours. It's everyone's here. So, and at some point in time, we'll get around to electing a chair or something to or switch around different leaders at different meetings. But
it's the one down there that says marketing. Had really a 4-year rollout campaign. We had an advertising agency, but again, our goal was to get to parents and kids in a variety of different venues. Let's go ahead and take down a couple. Here's where our target audience is. And you see right after students, parents were our second most important. Parents were our second most important population in our marketing efforts. School counselors, admissions officers, and others. But right up here is where we spent most of our marketing dollars. Let's walk through some of these. Next slide. Again, the message was one place. It's easy. You go to one place to do any of this. And that it represents all of our educational agencies and all those agencies that support paying for college, helping you plan, apply, and pay for college. Next slide. And it was TV, radio, print, and direct mail. We do a ton of stuff directly to students and directly to parents about what does a middle school parent need to know about financing a college. Direct mail, really good piece we have there. Billboards, huge. When I mentioned billboards in Vermont, they said we don't allow billboards in Vermont, but we do in North Carolina. A lot of collaterals like mouse pads and CDs and DVDs and that sort of thing. And we started out with, quite frankly, really cheap public service announcements. Let's go to the next slide. First year, in 2001, we just wanted to build brand awareness. Here's where you could go to plan, apply, and pay for college. Year 2, we started targeting the various services that I walked through. Year 3, we are also targeting services, and then in year 4, we started targeting specific audiences. But let's look at first year branding and awareness. Hit it again.
North Carolina students should have the opportunity to attend college.
This is our
College Foundation of North Carolina can help. At their website, cfnc.org, you'll find real answers to questions about career options, planning for college, applying online, and all types of financial aid. So if you or someone in your family wants to go to college, call College Foundation of North Carolina or visit their website today.
The governor did those. We had a state senator, Richard Burr, who did that, who ran against our university president for Senate office. We had the president of the independent colleges. We had the president of community colleges. So as well as students and parents hearing, this is where you can go to get this done, they saw the leadership. The educators saw the leadership of their state standing up and saying, here's one thing that we all agreed to. And that really helped us with not just parents and students, but also getting other agencies. Let's do the next one, see what that. Targeting services. Planning for college. The emphasis there was on plan. Our billboards, our TV and our radio spots in the spring of the student's junior year and the fall of their senior year, most of the emphasis is on planning. Second emphasis in the fall and the winter is on applying. This next one targets the application service. He's applying to college. On paper. Again, our tagline was plan, apply, and then thirdly, pay for college. This is my favorite one. For the last 4 years, we've had a different series of those every year, different commercials. That was 2 or 3 years ago. One criticism we had of those ads is they look like kids that are going to college. They're clean cut, they're well scrubbed, they look like college-bound students. Could you do something that got a message to young people that might not, and help them identify? So this next commercial was targeted. Well, that's a billboard. Would go along with the career planning. Let's see, what's this now? Hit it. Go forwards. Go forward again. There's another billboard, I think, after this. That's the billboard that matched. And here's where we went towards special audiences and targeting audiences. Go to the next one. This has a different look and feel to it.
It doesn't matter where you live.
Doesn't matter where you live.
I am. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you like to do. I am. There is a college just for you.
To college.
Going to college. College Foundation of North Carolina can help you find a college that's right for you. And scholarships, grants, and loans you need to go forward.
Again, the goal there was just to see a face that they could identify with. And again, it was targeted towards a number of audiences. You saw everything from rural North Carolina to inner city, Hispanic, African American, white. They were very well received in our state, which a lot of us were very nervous about it at first. We also did one for non-traditional students that showed displaced workers standing outside a factory saying, I am going to college, back to college to get retraining and education to get a job. Because that was a major, and it continues to be a major thrust. But that's some of the advertising, which gets at your point about how it's not just about teachers and educators and counselors, it's also about getting to the broad-based population of parents and students in their homes. And a lot of our marketing dollars came from areas outside of the university system because we just didn't have that money to do it. Now, the PSAs were free, but a lot of times they'd appear at 3 o'clock in the morning. In North Carolina, you can see some of these ads during Carolina's play in the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8. These commercials were shown, or commercials like these for CFNC.org. So again, the awareness is huge in the state. So our hope is that parents who have that interest will go here to work with their sons or daughters on this site.
Now, one of the things that you've talked about a lot about is the fact that you want to focus this for grades 6 through 12. All of that seemed to be focused primarily on the older high school students.
Yes.
Is there anything that you've done to focus or draw people's attention earlier?
Well, we did later, because we did adult students, we did some advertising. No, we have not. But now that we've developed this career development tool, I think, or implemented that, I think we probably will. We have not. Most of those kids look like juniors and seniors, and again, it's applying to college, paying for college, those messages, targeting some of those services.
Well, actually, along those lines, if you look at your 2 million records, how do they fall out? Are they mostly seniors, upperclassmen, underclassmen?
Seniors are number one. Interestingly enough, college freshmen are number 2. And that's because some of them are transferring and applying and sending transcripts. Others are redoing their financial aid application through this system. Right. Our third greatest usage was 8th graders in this most recent year, because that's when a lot of the career development takes place. And we do have charts that show that broken down by year, or grade in school or age. But it's high school seniors 1, college freshmen 2, 8th graders 3.
Have you thought about a family concept of parents and children going to college together?
Another interesting possibility. That's what's so great to sit around at tables like this, because that's obviously happening in many of what used to be our factory and mill towns. I mean, literally, these families would follow their grandparents and parents into the mill. And with 2 people working at reasonably good wages, they could stay right at home, get a decent job with very little education. That by and large, 75% of that does not exist in North Carolina anymore. So again, it's an education process for displaced workers and parents as well as young people. It's amazing how many people have worked for generations that no longer have that opportunity to work in the same hometown, in the same plant that's right down the street from their home. We closed in one day 5,000 jobs in Annapolis, where they worked with Pilatex, textiles. I mean, it's just amazing how much the industry is changing in North Carolina. Matt, I've taken you off target.
No, this is all good target. I'm done.
I have one question. I know the Commissioner mentioned at the beginning about reaching hundreds and thousands. That's the goal in the underserved areas here today. In North Carolina, what experience have you had as far as accessibility to the Internet? I know that you mentioned that most families and most students today, Latinos, African Americans, I guess that economic, underserved. What experiences have you had in North Carolina? Has the state stepped in to step up to offer wireless, Wi-Fi, laptops?
There have been individual school districts who have done great work. In one of our poorest school systems in the state, they have wireless connectivity, and every student in the high school has a laptop. I was just there a couple weeks ago. But that varies a great deal. In terms of outcome data, the chart I showed you shows that we have the largest % nationally increase in low-income kids going to college. We've been pleased with that outcome result, but I think it would be good to look at how much participation we have on a daily basis by school district or by region of the state. Because there are some regions that are going to do very well regardless of what we do because they're fairly affluent. But we have certain regions in the state, again, where industry, manufacturing was huge, where most of our work needs to be done.
Anything else? Well, we'll just move on the agenda then. The second thing in your book is this guidebook from the National College Access Network, and I'll just point it out to the group. And you got it via email, and maybe you had a chance to read it, maybe not. But it's what started me on this process for trying to work this out with the state, and what guided what will follow, which is the business plan that I drafted to give us an outline to work from. What to me, what this Lumina Foundation, who funded this program, again, they emphasize in it is it's not just a product, it's not just a web portal or a tool, it truly is a collaboration, and that's why it's not a model for a web portal, it's a model for a statewide educational collaboration. And the thing that they chose to do in that collaboration was create a web portal as a strategy for achieving, strategic goals of all the members, of all the collaborators. So everyone has a stake, everyone has an interest, and everyone gets some sort of benefit out of it. And I think that's the model we should look at in Texas as much as possible. When I was creating this business plan, what I realized, and we can go ahead and go to the plan, which is the next section, was Texas is cattle country, and all of them are sacred, and we have tons and tons of services out there, and I wish I could have found it. I think I left it somewhere, presentation, but I made up a couple of billboards. We just took the sampling of sites, and we had about 40 or 50 sites that are designed to help Texas students go to college somewhere, or to finish high school, or to to pay for college. And this is our current president engages in a lot of bush or thicket clearing, and I think that's obviously what needs to be done in Texas, is some thicket clearing and some integration. This group here, which, as the commissioner pointed out, look seriously at the things in the state that are working, the things in the state maybe that are not working, but maybe have potential, and what can be integrated and what can be put aside for the greater good of the students, as Joe said. So again, although there is an idea that we should all see benefit from this, the primary beneficiary should be the student. So in putting this together, I basically went with that model. Originally, this was commissioned by the State P16 Council, and you'll find some language. I keep finding another State P16 Council, which I keep crossing out, and so I just found another couple of references to them just recently. The idea just, it was that they may be an appropriate board for oversight, given that they're the commissioners or the heads of all the different agencies, and it might be a project that they could, in fact, sink their teeth into in a real way. Since that time, I think it's still worth a discussion of what their involvement might be, but they're not they're not an agency on themselves. They have no fiscal responsibility. They have no lawyers or any people or real staff or anything. So that idea, although it kind of runs throughout this document, because it was an idea we pursued for a good long time, may not be on the table, but I'm not going to take anything off the table myself. Basically, the executive summary goes into a discussion of the survey. I would encourage us to update that as we go on, and a discussion of North Carolina's achievements, which we've all heard about. And then, based on what North Carolina and the survey, and then interviews with a number of people who are at the back of this, I put together a long list, which is on page 6, of key elements. And these can probably be grouped into different areas, but the general idea, maybe we had said adult learners, of course, would be an important population. In the beginning, it was focused on students in grades 6 through 12, educational awareness and career development. Inclusive decision-making and buy-in, that's hopefully us, and integration of current systems, career path information, assessment tools for career paths and preparation. You'll read this in the survey documents, because many of these came straight from that survey. Affordability and availability of higher education. Some of these came from SPUPC, which is the Council of University Presidents and Chancellors, who when presenting on this subject, came to me and said, we just want something that really is going to show, affordability and availability. That's our critical issues for the universities. And things like, the sharing of applications, if someone's turned down, that would be a huge thing in Texas. And I think a lot of institutions would get behind. Leveraged resources, student-centered, FERPA compliant, optimized for user behaviors, counseling and planning for higher education statewide, auto-population of applications, permission-based hierarchy. That came up several times in several things, and I'm not sure that that is something that North Carolina actually does. But counselors that we interviewed were very concerned about still being the stopgap point for, so students in North Carolina can request their transcript be uploaded as part of their application. In other states, and it was the counselors that I spoke to, now this could be changed, but spoke to said that they wanted a permission-based hierarchy. So if a student did say they wanted their transcript submitted, that the counselor would get notice of that and approve that submission.
And that's the way it's done in certain states.
Right.
It really is. I mean, the counselor is the driver. In our state, we felt like the student should be, and the counselor should be notified. But in some states, the student still has to go to the counselor, and the counselor will send it electronically.
Right. And so whether or not that process is automated rather than, as you say, going into a counselor's office and asking them to do that.
Our current process is still going to the counselor.
Yes.
But we have automated the transferring of the student record and transcript.
Right. Right. That was in this last legislative session, and there's an item in there, the TREC system, and I think I referred to it later in this as a potential partner coming down the line. And so, and I think Patricia Sullivan from TA was also invited to this meeting, and I thought she was attending, but
I thought she was too.
You thought she was too? Okay. Well, maybe we'll look for her at other future meetings. The no cost to schools came out of yours, and it came out of several different models and state models I looked at. But again, that is something that can be discussed. The flexible content for diverse populations, bilingual web content. College for Texas right now, not all of it is bilingual, if you can believe that, and that all that information needs to be bilingual. I run a financial aid website for the UT system called Texas College Money, and it offers early financial aid estimates of the 9 UT system schools based on just 8 items of simple economic information, family economic information. And the second most visited site on that is the Spanish version of that calculator. And the third most visited site is the Spanish version of a college planning calendar we put out. And so, that to us now, our specific marketing has been in those really high need schools. 130 schools that are sending the least amount of kids to college. And that's what we're finding, is that they're a group that's really using that information. So accessibility and performance standards. We have someone from UT Austin who's an expert in this field. His name is Dr. Paul Resta, who is the chairman of the Information Technology Division. He is sick today, but he will be part of this committee. And he's expensive if you hire him, basically, for helping with just these kinds of things. So we're glad he's agreed to be on this working committee. Counselor training, and you couldn't have emphasized that better, and I think that's come up also in our discussions with Ohio and Utah and with the Counseling Association, that their buy-in and their training from within the ranks seems to be an essential part of this. Demographically aware content, we talked about that later, but it's maybe even a little more pronounced in Texas, because you're really talking about different cities, different places, urban, rural, all those kinds of things, and so developing the content and the style, and maybe it's not as fancy, but it actually does things. Maybe it's like what they do in North Carolina. Representative management and analytical evaluation and development, and that's what Drew here constantly referred to, is that feedback that comes in, and those web analytics, which are now getting very, very sophisticated, especially if you've got someone that's logging in, and you can get a lot of information back, and you can make a lot of decisions based on that information and how you develop the site. So. There's a little discussion about the target market and counselors and the marketing strategy. This organizational chart is totally draft. It should have just a big D on it. But it's something, though, that I think that as the model in North Carolina, it seems to be excellent. There was questions about where's the governance, who owns what. And it seems like you've really worked out something where you all share that responsibility. And, you know, I'm not sure where we'll end up in Texas, but I will tell the group right now some of these things will probably need to be resolved sooner rather than later. We have a couple of large foundations looking at funding the development of this. We're submitting drafts to Houston Endowment and to the Greater Texas Foundation that are due this week, actually. And so we will be, you know, some of this, your input on what this structure will be is important for that application, because it's the general feeling that obviously if it comes from here, it's going to come from the College for All Texans Foundation, and those funds are probably going to go into that foundation for this project. But we could put some specific language in there that makes sure that it's a collaborative project, you know, even though it may be owned by one agency or foundation or another. So I'd always put in that it's owned by the state of Texas, but that's pretty vague. So I'll turn the page. This is just language about the working committee on page 10. There was some issue about whether or not we call it a working committee or advisory committee. My opinion would be maybe we should call it working advisory committee. But the general idea would be...
call it the Special Working Advisory Committee?
You could call it the Special Working Advisory Committee, or the... That would be good. We'll turn the page.
Don't forget of the
but what I do want to know, again, is as you look through some of these names that were nominated by the commissioner, who you think that we might have left out. We're going to have a lot of, I know right now there's probably at least 10 people on this list that will not be part of the working committee. So there is a little room for new nominations. So the management, that was the first thing they did in North Carolina, was set up with a director, a counselor, and administrative assistant just to start handling things. Probably we're going that same way here. And performance assessment, which is page 13, again is the looking at the analytics that we need and want, the things that, you know, like FAFSA submission, what we want to track, how its success can be measured, and this committee needs to advise and help set those benchmarks and what we want to have tracked. So then that's again performance assessment is also 14. And 15, implementation schedule. Every time I print this, it's out of date because more time has gone through. But we're looking at a legislative session coming up. We're looking at putting in a legislative appropriations request for 2009 for continuing funding. The general strategy is to have development funding come from foundation, but to have the legislature take some action. If we miss our window this time around, there may not be any money left in 2011, and you know, so this would be a good time to get it in. even with a minimal amount of money, as we were saying, even if we think that there's interest, but working through our various governmental relations officers, and I mean, Chancellor Udolph I'm here because he wants me to be here, and he's engaged the UT Systems governmental relations people, and I know the coordinating board is also engaged in that process, and I think, the commissioners had discussions with Robert Scott about this on a certain level, but seeing that happen in some ways to give this group some traction, but to also get some sustaining funding, that would mean a lot to the foundations and the donors that want to step on board, but it would also mean a lot to just establishing the collaboration. So, working as quickly as possible towards that end as this committee can. We've been planning this for a long time at this point. We know there are good models. We know there's technology and there are products. If we can come to some agreement and we have a good collaboration working, I think we can work fairly quickly towards an RFP. And how that RFP, I had it on the first agenda that we would discuss the RFP process, but we're not quite there yet, and it's not known whether or not, as I said, the RFP might be issued by the foundation, which is College for All Texans Foundation, or it might be issued by a state agency or a couple of state agencies, or there's a number of different ways that could come out.
Where are you doing the funding request from?
The funding request is going to come from the College for All Texans Foundation. Now, they can give the money to the board, who can then do an RFP.
Right, but if the difference in terms of the state procurement requirements for College for Texans versus...
Yeah, right. The state procurement requirements for technology for College for All Texans are a lot less rigorous than those of, here. And we have somebody from DIR on this committee, but I think he just left. John Meary?
John Meary's no longer with.
He's no longer there, right. So they need to be part of the committee.
Let me call Brian Rawson and see who we can replace John.
Okay, yeah, Brian is the one that put John on the committee to begin with.
Yeah, I can take that action item.
Okay. But the thought was, especially from the funders' perspective, from the Houston Endowment in Greater Texas, was, if they did something, they would like to see it fairly soon. They have projects. Houston is doing a lot of projects in the Houston area that this kind of thing would support what they're doing. And all that they're doing with providing counselors in every school and providing, support to the current Go centers and all the things that they're working in the Gulf Coast region, this would support it in a great way if it can get up and rolling as soon as possible. So. Marketing. This was in here. This can be discussed. We may very well issue a separate RFP for marketing altogether, and market research and marketing. Joe, you said you have a corporation that handles the marketing for North Carolina, and I imagine that will be the same case, because the corporation that handles the product is not a marketing company, right? So, but mostly for the board of the higher ed board, I discussed more in depth what that marketing might look like. But it's like what Joe says, air cover to grassroots. And that's and so everything from the PSAs and the television to school programs and parent programs. FERPA, that full disclosures on plagiarism. I think that comes straight from UT's FERPA statement and the several state FERPA statements, so it's obviously not very specific. There's been some, David Gardner asked that maybe the attorneys from here, Bill Franz, and maybe from TEA might talk with the attorneys in North Carolina, if Joe can provide some contact information to help just establish what the issues are going to be and what needs to be smoothed out or can be smoothed out, and give us some direction on, so that we're not again issuing an RFP for something that we can't do. That I think would be a good step to go forward with. The accessing content section is really just about it's web analytics, and it's a modern website. It talks about you build how you want to view the site by the interest that you've chosen. So it provides content to you, where we would ask the site provide content based on certain interests and activities on the site. And so the last few pages are, of course, budget and sustainability. This budget number is, again, very, very vague, much like Joe's figures are vague. Some of that will depend on the requirements and specifications this group decides on. A lot of it will depend on the requirements and specifications, I would think, and what we feel can be integrated that's currently existing, and what needs to be replaced or rebuilt.
Hey, Joe, can I ask you a quick question in terms of, did you all start with what we see on the website today, or did you phase in pieces at a time, and if so, do you have a timeline of when you phased in different pieces?
Yes, most of what you saw today was the basic structure. The left navigation, those were a lot of additions, and the main modules across the top were there, but they've been developed further and added a lot of value to them. To me, what it sounds like you have here is you have a lot of the pieces already. You have a transcript system that I correctly have a common application system, at least. Is that for publics and privates, or just publics?
Privates can participate if they come on board, and a few do, but they don't have to. And the community colleges are just now coming on.
It sounds like you need those pieces within a structure that ties them together. The answer to your question is yes, we added value to a great deal of what you see there. The main look is the same, but the content, for example, the student planner came up originally with just the courses that you need to take to get into a college, but we added SAT prep in the third year.
Well, and I'm thinking about like the college, the articulation sections and those kind of things. I mean,
that will be added. That does not exist there now at all.
Did you envision all those things as you developed it?
Absolutely not.
Okay, all right.
And I think that's been one of the biggest benefits we've realized is by bringing everyone like this to the table, is a lot of ideas come up that we would have never considered from our little world of college access at the University of North Carolina system, even though we have some great people that have worked with programs like this for a long time. It's been the collaboration which has stimulated a lot of the evolution. And classic example is this transfer articulation piece. I mean, that was something that we had thought about and talked about, but it took the president of community colleges and the president of universities saying, we've got to do this, because this is where this next wave of students will go. They'll start out in the community colleges. Let's build this tool now, and let's find the money. So when the College Access Challenge grants came to the governor said, let's use part of that money for this, because we've been talking about it, we just haven't done it yet.
it sounds like you already have a mandatory course numbering system, uniform course numbering system.
We do for the community colleges. We do not for the universities, interestingly enough. So half of it's really easy. The other part we have built. I mean, literally over the past 6 months, we have asked each campus to identify how each general ed course transfers from the community college common numbering system to the university's differential system among the 16. So we have it built. In fact, it's in a static website on the UNCGA's website, but it's not interactive at all. A student can go and look at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and see how their course transfers, but they can't input their courses and look at 16 different schools. They have to look at every course on every campus to get to it. So we have the information, it's just putting it in a system that helps the student mix what they have with what the campuses, transfer credits.
So what percent in North Carolina and in Texas of applications for community college and university are the common application? Electronic common application in North Carolina?
Texas.
In North Carolina or Texas. What percent of the applications to community college and university are the online common application?
Of our 16 public universities in North Carolina, 14 are exclusive users of this. So my guess would be 80% plus.
So does that mean if you filled out a paper application, you couldn't fill out, does that mean you couldn't fill out a paper application to those 14 universities?
Absolutely not. In fact, the majority of them you can still do a paper. The school where I worked only accepts electronic now. This was their first year.
So what would you say, half of the applications to public universities in North Carolina are online? Would you say less than that? Far more than half,
yes.
But far fewer than all.
Yes. Probably, again, at that one campus, it's all 100%. I would say it's upward of 75% at most schools are electronic.
And for community college, it's
much lower than that.
Much lower than half?
Yes.
Okay.
But interestingly enough, they're the ones that need it the most because they're the students that apply at the last minute. And if they could go when they're going to registration and submit an electronic application, boom, it's processed, get their transcript sent electronically, they can apply, send their transcript, and register on the fly. So, again, part of our problem there has been their conversion to DataTel, but almost all of our community colleges use this application exclusively. So almost all of their electronic transfer of applications is through our system. It's just a matter of persuading schools to push this electronic use as opposed to the hard copy use. But again, most of them are using this system. Almost all of them are exclusive users. But they don't have the volume yet that the universities do.
And any idea?
The exact numbers,
Yeah.
I just need to go back
Sure.
and do a look.
And any idea for Texas what the electronic represents as a share? And who owns the Apply Texas?
The coordinating board, I believe, owns Apply Texas. All the the technology is served out of UT Austin, and the management's out of UT Austin. But the coordinating board, I believe, is the main fiscal agent and owner of Apply Texas.
Let me ask, who owns transcripts? Is that K-12? That
PA.
project? Okay. And see what you see here is an example of what we were talking about. You have different agencies owning different aspects of what could be combined into one site to simplify it for students. You've got the coordinating boards with a common app. You've got K-12 with responsibility for the transcript. They're separate agencies, and they do it completely separate, I imagine, at this point. But they could be brought together in one portal to perform that function, which is, in the minds of a student or a counselor or a parent, one function. It's not independent.
So when you're saying the transcript, do you mean the AAR? Is that what you mean by the transcript?
Yes, we do the student record and also the transcript. Now, we do participate in Speedy. And,
Right.
A school can send a transcript to Speedy, and then the school can pick it up from Speedy.
Right. And there's already been discussions between the Apply Texas and those doing the transcript about connecting those two. But I think with some cost to higher education, I think is what some of it depends on, and then some other things that have to be worked out. But obviously, this committee and this group could maybe help move that along, or put in the rest of the information, because neither of those things come with any information. So you have to know exactly what you're doing and why before you get to Apply Texas.
Is there a cost to using Apply Texas for the student?
The cost is set that depending on where you are applying to. That's the application fee is set by the school.
So UT could decide to set $1 per application aside to build this, or ACC could set aside $1 of their application to build this.
Our feeling is that those currently participating in Apply Texas pay a fee based on their usage right now to Apply Texas to run the system, and that's about $700,000. And you total all of that up. I think about a third of it's paid by UT Austin. And actually, Austin provides a lot of in-kind funding as it is already. So overhead and stuff like that they don't charge the state. So, my feeling is that institutions would be, whether or not they would then come forward with another whatever fee it was. It's been done in some states where you basically tax institutions to participate.
Yeah, we don't.
But
all of this is paid for by the state. So the electronic application which a college gets, they charge their application fee. There is no surcharge to a campus for application through our system. We pay for that. That function is paid for, as is the transcript. There are some states where you have electronic transcripts through a state system, but it's paid for by the individual student. There are some states that have statewide college application systems through a vendor, but each student pays $5 over and above the cost of an application at the college. In North Carolina, we decided from the outset the state would encumber the cost of applications and transcripts and career development. So the state funded this project as opposed to campus, a high school, or a student or a parent paying for it. None of those agencies pay anything.
If the college has an application fee, they do. How does the student transmit that money, or the parent?
Electronically. Almost
By
all of it goes
card?
through credit card.
So if they don't have a credit card, can they mail?
You can use an electronic check, or you can mail. But again, that sort of defeats the purpose. It takes an extra step. We're looking at a system now, because we have so many low-income students who are eligible for application fee waivers, for automating that on the back end, so a counselor can give a student permission to submit an application electronically without a fee if they're on a 3 minutes lunch plan. But again, that's one of those things that we've heard from counselors that's hurt low-income kids, is they don't have $75. They may be number one in their class and have a great test score, but they don't have $75 to apply to Chapel Hill, and another $75 to apply to North Carolina State, let alone $55 to another campus. It's expensive.
we're going to have to wrap this up pretty soon, because I need to take Joe to the airport. But on the budget, he brought up the College Access Challenge grant, and I have already made a proposal to Commissioner Paredes and to David Gardner to, if the funds go to that agency, it's not, the governor's office has not said whether or not they're going to go to the coordinating board, if they go to TEA. I would say this might be something that we look at as part of that grant. You were saying you're going to get like 3, and it's going to end up being more like 13 in Texas, and so it's a great deal of funds that's coming out in over 2 years for programs just like this. And you said that several other states are making proposals to use their College Access Challenge grants for this.
Last week, and again, the goal of those grants is to build something that's sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the cost in a project like this is development. Once it's development, it's maintenance, and that would be the role long-term of the state or some other resource to sustain that. But again, that's one great thing a state can do is build a resource, statewide resource. And some states are opting to do this. There are a lot of different things they're considering.
And in talking with some vendors about some costs, I just put together, I have a further breakdown of this in an Excel chart, but a 3-year budget of about $3.5 million for development, and it could be a lot more than that in the sense of depending on the functionality you want it to do, but that's the sort of basic bare bones of doing what you did at first, and also looking at the integration of current things that we already have, like transcripts and the common application, which are expensive technological pieces that if they could work with the system, they might save a lot of money for the whole thing. So that's pretty much the plan. But what I will do with this is I'll strip it out as just a plain white document to start the process of really filling it out and passing it around. But
did you clarify or state what the executive oversight was?
No. The executive oversight, as far as I understand it right now, is the lead agency on this project. And now, if that is the Higher Education Coordinating Board, then that is the executive oversight. And right now, that's the assumption I'm working under for grants I'm submitting. But it's in North Carolina it's the UNC system. But again, it's you don't make decisions without everybody being at the same table. So no, I didn't. But and maybe that's a discussion that the commissioners could agree on. And I would say that we should encourage them to have, again, sooner rather than later. And maybe there's multiple executive oversight so that some people do control the parts that they own and others control the parts they own. When you were invited to this meeting, and the title and the agenda is that it's a College for Texans redesign. And that's kind of what it is, but now you're seeing, of course, that it's a lot more than that, and it involves a lot more people than just the colleges and universities, and so that's why the P16 committee was suggested as possible, but that's not been done. Now, do we want to talk briefly about? I can send out just dates. What we're looking at is, maybe 2 meetings over the next 2 months, and I can send out this group some dates. But if anybody wants to tell me just now what's not good,
I'd send them out.
Okay.
Respond.
Okay.
You may want to just consider or ask for input with regard to days when you can. For example, a day-long competitors council meeting would prohibit a number of folks from participating.
Right.
What do you see us doing at the next meeting?
What do you see?
I'm guessing finalizing the plan?
I think that finalizing the plan, reviewing foundation proposals, and if with the help of probably a larger group, we have some superintendents that weren't able to be here, to see if there's still research or market research that needs to be done before we take steps.
Because I'm hoping we don't redo what we did here in a second meeting.
No.
So I mean, the way I guess the way I've been thinking about this is the best franchise is Supply Texas, and I think of its evolution as less of an application and more of a plan that you can press a button and it'll apply for you. And so if that's your franchise, that you drive traffic to the site, I mean, it's the rationale for using all of these planning tools, and it's something that presumably you're going to have to do if you want to apply. How do you build around that franchise? How do you then pre-populate your FAFSA? How do you pre-populate your Common App? How do you allow institutions to know what you want to do with your life so they can recruit you? I know I'm taking a big assumption step, but that's where I'm figuring we get to the lick log.
Well, the integration of Apply Texas into this, I mean, we Lois Hollis, who's the person at the board who does Apply Texas here, or heads up, coordinates that, I mean, is key. I mean, you can't do this without the online application. So in that respect, you're right. Now, whether or not the brand is Apply Texas or Apply Texas becomes something else that's not just about apply, is
more a plan than it is an application.
Or a plan, or it's all of the above. I mean, I think that's what they saw. You know, right now I'm also have a contract to build a financial aid site for the coordinating board. Well, that's going to be a completely, that's going to make three. So College for Texans, Apply Texas, and probably the statewide version of Texas College Money.
I think that at the next meeting we ought to have a discussion of, at least at the very minimum, what's the scope of work. I mean, we can't issue an RFP unless we tell the prospective vendor what we expect.
Right.
And then look at it not in terms of what product exists, but what functionality do we want. Do we want career exploration first, or do we want that to come in year 3, year 4, year second? Do we want application to come in first, or pay for college to come in first? Talk about the scope, understanding that years later we might do articulation agreements, we might do some of those things. But you can't issue an RFP unless you know what you're going to ask for to begin with. And then we can look at, okay, who is currently doing that, and making sure that we agree up front that they're going to be the core of what this RFP is going to look like in terms of the functionality. I think that would be worthy time for next meeting, so that we can do an RFP, so that your funders could know what they're going to be paying for. And then I think we need to develop a master plan of what are all the auxiliary functionalities that we want in year 2, in year 3, in year 4, and have a pecking order of what those things are.
Well, and I think that's why we have to, like you said, come back together and have that conversation. But I think the bottom line is that we start from what North Carolina's got, and then add in all the other stuff that we'd like to see have happen, and then require that in the RFP that each segment of that is bid out individually. So that we, you know, when we get down to the decision making of what we're going to add, we say, okay, we want parts A, C, Q, whatever, and that's going to be what we're going to take as our model. And but you have to have them bid individually.
Right.
It all operates out of one platform.
Right. Now, so I still say it has to be a sole source, but I mean, they have to be able to do this with multiple segments.
Points are all really good ones, but in my very limited observation of what you have here is you have some really unique things that you've already built and developed and have a lot of investment in. So how do those fit into a system that does exactly what you said, and that is build towards a process of applying? And that's all those things we talked about, but the system has to integrate what you already have. You don't want to reinvent the application process, or you don't necessarily want to reinvent transfer.
But we don't want to recreate a brand new data system either.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah. You already have a lot to work with that is really very strong. It's just a matter of finding a platform that will integrate those functionalities and, as you said, build the initial ones that you want. What is that career tool that Texas wants? Or is there one? You have 2 or 3 listed in the notes there.
So for next time, just to, since everybody needs to get scope of work, research required to identify that scope of work, and a review of the funding proposals. Does that sound like a plan? And we can maybe talk separately about governance issues that might get resolved in the meantime.
But that would need to be ironed out at the next meeting.
No offense to anybody here, but that may need to take place at a different level than represented here.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about, as a separate meeting. Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank y'all. And is there anything else?
Thank you for putting it together.
Yeah. Good job.
Thank you, Joe.